Welcome to another edition of the Roar of the Lions UK podcast, episode 329, Scouting This Class Ain't a Burden. My name's Matthew Turner, alongside Anthony Fitzpatrick and Ashley Soden. How you doing, boys? Looks like we're having some trouble on the audio for you guys. On Streamlabs. Hang on. Talk again now.
Long snappers.
Thank you. Sorry, everybody. Streamlabs decided to change the audio input for you guys without looking like it had, so we're back. Right. All of that good stuff about Ryan Farden and defense and Ash looking offended. That's some funny stuff. That will go into the annals. That'll be just for the podcast listeners, because that was working on Zoom, but there we go. Never mind. Apologies for that. We are here, of course, to talk about the wide receiver class that, as I said, is not a burden to scout this year, because we are talking wide receivers. We have profiled 10. I said 9 before, but someone added one to the list, so I am now lying, and I don't like lying. There are now 10 on the list. But we have another 4 or 5 to chat about as well. And if anyone has any questions as we're going on in the live chat, please do. This is a big class of wide receivers. There's a lot of depth. There's a lot of people we won't talk about today. But we've got lots in detail. But of course, we've got some preamble, some news to go through as we always do. First of all, please do come and join our Discord channel. There's lots of good stuff which is going to come all the way through from now until the draft and beyond, including our first in-depth recorded preview of a player which Ant has done. Ant, who have you profiled?
I've done my profile for Ricky White, the wide receiver out of UNLV, who I'll be talking about tonight as well. Yeah, YouTube are not very sensitive sometimes about doing content and that on there. So what we decided to do is it's a Google Doc at the minute. It's in a Google Drive. So if anybody wants to see it, I'll send them the link to it and you can test it out. It's the first one I've done. Wanted to do it for years, and I've got quite a few already set up and ready, so we're going to do a lot more of those. Just give you a bit more, just sit and watch tape with guys and see what you think about him, but he's really good. Hint.
Yeah. A breakdown involving some tape, so not on YouTube, as he says. So if you want the link, come and talk to us. We can send the link over to you. All right. Discord as well, we'll put it in there too, or you can contact us through there. So that's a good place to kind of come and find us. And hopefully that will not be the last one of this cycle. We'll try and hit the ground running on all of those. College Football Podcast last week as well wasn't streamed live, but it was done as a premiere on YouTube. And Ant, what did he talk about?
We did a preview for the combines. Obviously, it's combine week. Combines already happening at this moment in point. They're all starting to arrive, and in a few days, all the drills and everything will start for some of the players, anyhow. But yeah, we sort of did a breakdown of all the players going, who maybe needs to have a good combine, who maybe will suffer if they don't do a good one, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was a lot to go on that one. We did a bit of college football news as well, sort of some bits and bobs. But yeah, it's good fun.
I've just started it. I am fascinated by the idea of the expanded playoffs. And, I mean, if Notre Dame finish in the top 14, then the whole top 14 is locked. That's just such a boring way to do it. I don't like it. I also don't like the idea of no buys. 16 team, 3 wildcards of Notre Dame in there. That'd be good. I would be a big fan of that. Anyway, if you want to hear more about the expanded playoffs and the combine, please do go and listen to that. And please do like this episode and sub to the podcast. You guys know what to do on that front. And support Lions Nation Unite in their endeavours. Herman Moore's project to bring the best in Lions content creators together. and we're Twitch affiliated, YouTube monetized. There's a tip jar down below if you want to show some love that way. We would much appreciate you, and many thanks to everyone in the chat for chatting along with us this afternoon, to Carlton Wood and Grandizer, and to Damien Smith, who wants to know about Shaq Thompson, as well as Chris Brown, who says, "Hi, just found your channel. Much appreciated for you being here." Just very quickly, Shaq Thompson not coming back to the Carolina Panthers. Any interest in bringing him in?
For the right price, yeah. As me and you discussed on our Discord, he'd be a nice sort of veteran backup, can back up both the Will and the Mike spots. Just someone else for Jack and Malcolm to bounce ideas off as they because they obviously play the same kind of positions. And he's just a good veteran leader, so I would definitely be right there for the right price.
Yeah, I'd do it. You want good depth for your team, and linebacker's the one position we struggled with the depth last year, just simply because of all the injuries, and it would have been good to have a guy of his experience around and ready to go to help out. So yeah, you kind of want another guy in there this year, as well as all the ones we've currently got. So I'd be quite happy with that if the deal can be done at the right value. It's all value based. So, but yeah, if it can be done, let it be done.
I mean, the thing about value-based is the guy's had just over 300 snaps in the last 2 years combined, both, I think, done by injuries. So if he's going to go to anyone, it's going to be on a very cut-price deal, given that he's barely played in the last 2 seasons. I mean, maybe that makes him a perfect fit, but it should mean that there's some quality out there at a cheap price. And I mean, before that, he hadn't been injured in a major way in his previous 8 combined seasons. So it's not like the injury bug has been a thing for him in his career. It's just recent and long career as a former first-round pick from 2015. Brent has got a question for us as well, which I'll put here now. I don't know if you've done a huge amount of HBCU research as yet, Ant, but Brent is asking about whether any HBCU wide receivers have a shot at a late-round pick, or are they all going to be UDFAs? Any insight at all?
Yeah, none of them are getting drafted. I'll put it that way. There's one. If you're going to get a drafted player this year, it's either going to be a DB or an offensive tackle. No receivers, unfortunately.
Right, we've got some very quick Lions news when it comes to coaches and other bits and pieces. This will be brief, so if you're just here for draft, we will be there very, very shortly. But the Lions coaching staff has been fully announced, with Tyler Roll confirmed as tight ends coach, Seth Ryan from assistant wide receivers coach to assistant tight ends coach, Marquise Tuesopo and Bruce Gradakowski as offensive assistants. Thank you for making me say that, Ash. Justin Mesa, offensive quality control coach. Jim O'Neill, officially as a safeties coach. He was just a defensive assistant last year, now officially the safeties coach. David Corral has been promoted to senior defensive assistant and outside linebackers coach. And August Mangin and Caleb Collins are defensive assistants. In other news, former fullback, linebacker, and friend of the pod, the only active player to have ever been interviewed on this show, Jason Gopinda, has announced his retirement, which is sad, but no team picked him up, I don't think, after he left the Lions, and he is walking into the sunset. He got some payday from the Lions, so hopefully that's enough to see him into his future endeavours. Jameson Williams has been confirmed will face no discipline from the league after his dismissed gun charge. The league consider the matter closed. Director of Football Compliance and Lead Football Council John Dykmer has been hired by the Michigan State football team as Executive Senior Assistant AD and Student Athletes Management and Assistant General Counsel. That is a very long job description, job name, job title. And finally, John Morton and Kelvin Shepherd were interviewed by Dan Miller last week. John Morton confirmed he will call plays in. For me, that's a surprise. It's going to be a collaborative process with Goff over the offense. He basically said that he was part of the room that did that the first time, and he expects that to continue. And Kelvin Shepherd said he wanted to stay in Detroit because of Dan Campbell, and implied he turned down multiple other offers to stay. He joked that he wanted to eventually be head coach 1B, which is quite amusing. Boys, a lot of news, not a huge amount of it moving the needle particularly, just confirming some things we already knew, or some sad news with Jason. Otherwise, some insight from our new coordinators. Any general thoughts about any of that news from each of you?
The only big thing is, for me, is Seth moving from assistant wide receivers to tight ends. maybe suggests he's on the Tanner Engstrand, Ben Johnson path because they're trying to get him experience in other rooms. And obviously, look what's happened with our previous tight ends coaches, aside from Hayden being promoted to passing game coordinator, offensive coordinator. So it seems he's finally on that track. But yeah, everything else was pretty much confirmed before the staff was fully announced. Like we were even speaking last week about Roll saying, oh, yeah, probably be tight ends coach. So pretty much all in all with the coaching staff, it's to be expected.
Yeah, I've nothing to add.
Fair. All right, we will get into this then. And Ash, you are first up in our look at the wide receiver class of 2025. Take it away.
So I'm starting with someone who is definitely a bit of a riser this draft cycle as people start scouting, and that is the Iowa State wide receiver Jayden Higgins. He is 6'4", 215 pounds, and he's a senior. He spent his first 2 seasons with Eastern Kentucky before transferring to Iowa State in 2023 and played the past 2 seasons there. This past season, he got a 90.3 offensive grade from PFF with a 90.5 receiving grade, 91.2 drop grade, 76.5 fumble grade, and a 62.3 run blocking grade. He played 741 offensive snaps. And on those snaps, he got 129 targets for 87 receptions, which is a 67.4% catch rate, for 1,185 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 106.9 passer rating when targeted. He had a 2.2% drop rate, a 58.3% contested catch success rate. He forced 12 missed tackles, and he got 4 penalties. He was used out wide on 70.9% of his snaps, and then the other 29.1% he was used in the slot. He also played 3 special team snaps, 2 of which were punt returns, 1 of which was kick returns, and he basically fair caught all of them, and he didn't get any penalties on them, so that's a bit of a positive. So the game I watched for him was his game this year against the Kansas Jayhawks. He got a 76.3 offensive grade, 75.3 receiving grade, and a 61.4 run block grade. He got 7 catches and 12 targets for 88 yards and no touchdowns. He was used out wide in that game on 78% of his snaps, the other 22% in the slot. Didn't drop a thing, but he was unfortunately also 0 for 2 on his contested catches. So strengths of him, very, very productive. So over his career, he's had 3,309 yards and 28 touchdowns. So this is a guy that you can trust to produce. You know what you're getting out of him. He also shows grit. He fights for the extra yards. A couple of times in the Kansas game, he even had his helmet blown off, like from the force of the tackle. Just got back up, put it back on, and went back into the huddle to get the next play. And because of that sort of physical presence he has, he draws coverage towards him, which opens things up for other receivers to get open. And when he does go for the catch, he uses his body to shield out the defenders and force them to play through him, drawing DPIs, which he did on the 3rd play against Kansas, I believe. And then he's also then able himself to subtly commit OPI in a way that won't get called most of the time, just to get that extra little bit of separation at the catch point. So a little sneaky hand, just a tiny push off, get that extra bit of separation to make the catch. And if he's not the target, but someone catches the ball around him, he's very willing to block for them, using his body to almost screen the man from his defender from the ball and make sure his teammate can get an extra couple of yards. Very, very proficient at what I call the Josh Reynolds route tree. So you go, your goes, your posts, but also your intermediate digs. So there's 10, 15 yard ins that seemingly Josh Reynolds ran all the time for us. Tim Patrick was running this year. Those are some of Jayden Higgins' best routes. And when he does get the ball in his hand, especially on those routes, he just turns upfield and just tries to get as many yards as he can after the catch. And when he's getting tackled, when he's getting hit, he has good contact balance. He's able to force those missed tackles, break through the arm tackles, and get an extra couple of yards. And when it does come to the run blocking, he has very, very good technique. But to sort of move on to the weaknesses with that segue of the run blocking, sometimes he does lack a bit of violence to the run blocking. So he does enough technique-wise, but there's quite a lot of the time he's just there. It looks like he's almost having a chat with a friend rather than what we kind of come to expect from Lions receivers with Amon-Ra. So obviously the infamous clip from the Ravens game a couple of years ago where we were down bad, but Amon-Ra still there. He was still trying to fuck the Ravens cornerbacks up with his run blocking. You don't really get that from Higgins most of the time. It's mostly just, I'm going to block you, but I'm not really going to put too much force behind it, which it's not really a negative in a way, but compared to what we expect for our receivers, what the team expects, it might be a slight knock of him on their draft board. And sometimes he doesn't attack the ball when it's in the air. So if the fields are a bit high, doesn't really go up for it. And unfortunately, it did lead to a pick six in this game. And he does round his cuts on some of the routes. So those digs I was mentioning, sometimes instead of making that nice sharp cut, breaking down, then cutting, he kind of rounds it out, which allows the cornerback to stay with him rather than getting a bit of separation with a nice cut. And he doesn't have top end speed. He's able to get the separation, but this is either by the concept getting him open with a rub route or something, or him using his physicality to get open rather than having speed, which does lead to his comparison for me, which is, well, I want him at least, which is Dyer to Drake London. So both were used in very similar ways in college, but unfortunately Higgins is not as big or as fast as London was as a prospect. But another comp I have for him is Cortland Sutton, who obviously John Morton knows very well, being in Denver the past couple of years. So they're both very, very similar. So 6'3", 218 for Cortland Sutton, and he ran a 4.54 40. Higgins is projected to run about a 4.5 40-yard dash, so very similar. So his best fit is as that sort of Josh Reynolds, Tim Patrick style wide receiver 2-3 who plays the majority of their snaps on the outside at the X position, but does offer the versatility to play inside as a big slot in certain packages. Won't blow you away with speed, but he has good enough route running and physicality to win, especially over the middle and intermediate routes. So he's currently the 9th rated wide receiver on our consensus board, the 67th overall ranked prospect. I'd have him higher than that as a middle of the second round prospect who could have a Ricky Pearsall level rise with a good combine to dispel some of the doubts about his ceiling speed-wise. As mentioned on the Combine College pod, obviously Pearsall blew everyone away with the short shuttle and the free cone, got that rise from being a midday 2 guy to bottom end of the first. So I'm very much projecting that for Jayden Higgins. If he has a good 40-yard dash and good shuttle, he could really start to push the end of the first round, especially if he's the best player on our board. We could easily pick him at 28.
Any thoughts, Ant? 28 seems very high, but are you a fan?
I mean, of course, he plays on a team which I have a lot of love for, and I've watched a lot of football of. And him and Jalen Noel have just been one of the best wide receiver duos in college football for the last 2 years. They complement each other so well. One's a big bruiser on the outside, one's a meticulous route runner on the inside, and like a lot of teams have just not been able to deal with them. And the thing that's been so impressive about Jayden Higgins, he was a transfer. He was a transfer from the FCS, and he got nearly 1,000 yards in his first year. He broke 1,000 yards in his second year. The transition between levels of competition, going from that right up to the Power Four, and getting to a championship game this year for him, that's a big rise. And you see some areas of his game where he's not as fully developed yet. Well, again, that sort of bases in with the competition level and what you've been asked to do. And there's a lot of it that he just hasn't. But in terms of him as a receiver, I mean, you see some of the grabs that he makes, they're sensational. The hands are really good. The effort is always willing, and what you need there. And he's coming out of a system where you would trust the coaching there as well. And I think his rise has been certainly justified. I know for him, people, knock on the speed. The speed is an issue. Like the long speed is an issue, and he's got to get a little bit better against press. So sometimes he just needs to get those hands a little bit better. Just need to get a little more pop off his get-go, which also goes into the run game stuff as well. But this is like not insurmountable stuff. This is coaching and teaching and training with, he's got all the other attributes really that you want from him. So, I agree the combine will be big for him. If you can show that short area burst, you can show the tight ins and outs, just getting those little bits of separation, which you're going to need at the next level to be able to flourish, will be big for him. But if he does well, and I would expect him to maybe carry on rising a bit more. He's certainly in that back end of he's certainly in the Trey Harris conversation, and like in that back area of that. Trey Harris is another who should get the love for there. And I think as we see in the NFL now, like traditional stereotypes are, you're going out the window. Like a few years ago, short receivers were out of fashion, but there's a way for them to work in the NFL now. Slot receivers were going out of fashion. Now there's a way to make them work in the NFL, and they're incredibly valuable to you. And I think just as much, like you've seen with Tim Patrick this year, there is a value to having a guy who can be on the outside and can grab some of those ones that other guys just can't. He's got the size, he's got the frame, and he will go up and get it for you, and it's in vogue now, so I don't matter about his speed too much. I think he's going to be a really good acquisition for someone, and a friend, especially if it's a young QB looking for someone he can hit on the perimeter, looking for a reliable target. That'll be him. So I like that he's rising. He deserves this rise, and hopefully we continue to see it.
All right, I have nothing to add, so instead, Ant, it's time to pivot to your first man.
I guess we'll start with the highest ranked of them all. So you named the show after him, but I've got Luther Burden the third, and when I was kind of thinking about the guys I wanted to do this week, so I had my two I had right out the bat, but Luther Burden's someone I've always admired since he came into college football, but I've never really taken the greatest interest in him, because I've always just assumed this guy's going to go way too high in a draft and he's going to have nothing to do with us. But I love Luther Burden, and he's been getting a bit of a knock recently. Guys have been moving him down in drafts, and I thought, right, well, let's go back to him. Let's see what's going on. Let's see what this is all about. So just to start off the bat, obviously, Mizzou wide receiver. He is one of Missouri's highest rated recruits ever. This guy was a big 5-star recruit. A lot was expected of him coming in. He was coming off a huge high school career. His last year alone had nearly 1,700 yards receiving, 1,000 yards punt returning, 8 return touchdowns on punts in one season. Like, this guy was absolutely elite coming out. And to be fair, for the most part, he's lived up to his billing in college. So he's only been in 3 years. He's a junior this year. He's declaring early. He's only 22, so he's got age on his side. He's 5'11", 208 pounds. So in his 3 seasons, 193 receptions, 2,283 yards, just a smidge under 12 yards of reception, and 21 touchdowns. Also adding a rushing element to his game as well. He's got 4 rushing touchdowns as well, as that's something that they've been introducing into his game. And obviously, he's done some special teams work. With him being the crown jewel of that team, they've not been risking him on punt returning much. He's done very little of it, but he still works on special teams occasionally. But anyhow, who is he? What is Luther Burden? For me, he is one of the most dynamic weapons to come out of the draft in years at receiver. And with the ball in his hands, there's no better receiver in this class in terms of the skills that he possesses. So, with the size, 5'11", 208, he does work primarily out the slot. He has in his career. He's worked 36% on the outside, just over 60% on the inside. So there's actually quite a good balance between using him and out, using him in. But a lot of his best work comes in the slot. And why? Because he's just got the elite traits in that area. So his hands, 74% catch rate this year, one of the best in the country. His hands early, you throw it to him, this stuff sticks like glue. He very rarely drops, he very rarely fumbles. He is great when it comes to his ball security, the contact balance, the footwork. He possesses sub 4.4 speed, which isn't elite nowadays for a receiver. But when you've got a guy who's so technically gifted, sub 4.4 speed gives you a big advantage, and his short area speed is actually really good as well. Now, he had his big year in his sophomore year, 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns, took everything by storm, and everyone thought he was going to break out massively this season. But then from 120 targets last year, he went down to just 80 targets this year, 676 yards and 6 touchdowns, which is why everyone suddenly kind of wondered what happened to him. And, I've taken a deeper look at this to go and have to try and answer, to see whether it's him, he's regressing as a player, or whether it's what's happened around him that has affected the way he's been playing. And a reason I'm going to back him here against this drop is I think the team around him has regressed this season. Now, it'll not show it on the record. They were still a 10-win team this year, but we've got to look down into the advanced stats for Brady Cook this year. So Brady Cook, his quarterback, who he's been playing with, his adjusted completion rating this year was 70.7. That didn't even make the top 100 of quarterbacks in college football this year. It's been poor. His big throw rate, 3.3%, is well below average for a Power 4 quarterback. And not to mention his offensive line has not been as good. Membu at right tackle aside, he's had 2.3 seconds to throw on average this season. And what this has done, he's not been throwing downfield. The field's been condensing. Obviously, the middle of the field has been getting a lot tighter, and it's been harder for this offense to hum like it usually does, and with no Cody Schrader at running back either to help stretch the field. This had a big impact on how this is played, because I've watched 2 games specifically from the 2023 and the 2024 season. His big game against LSU last year, he went 11 for 149, and then I watched their game against South Carolina this year. He did go 8 for 69 and get a touchdown in it, but last year playing against LSU, obviously, you've got your star running back in. Brady Cook's a little bit more confident than he was, but he absolutely Swiss cheesed them. His touchdown was a great contested grab against Zay Alexander, one of the young DBs there. There were go routes where he was shredding linebackers and safeties through the middle of the field. They were getting him on end arounds out the backfield. They were putting the ball in his hands and manufacturing touches for him. And as I say, when he gets it in his hands and he's got a little bit of ground in front of him, the feet, the hands, the contact pads, it's so hard to bring him down. He goes at nearly 7 yards after the catch per rate for him there. So, especially in the middle of the field where it's crowded, that's a lot of yak over the course of a season. And Japanese look very confident. And then you come to the South Carolina game this year, and it was just so different. Like, they were using him in motion, like so many plays, they were motioning him over the field, but they weren't doing it to get the ball in his hands. They were doing it almost in like a chessboard move where they were moving the defense around and creating opportunities for others, specifically Theo Wease, who's really benefited from that this year. He's been getting a lot more one-on-one looks because of the attention getting paid to Burden, and Brady Cook's just, quite frankly, been awful. A lot of his throws have been inaccurate. A lot of the catches that Burden's had have been behind him, have been off the mark. He's been having to readjust, and all the passes are just not reaching him. Now, and you look at that and you take it in consideration, like this is why the production has dropped off. I look at this guy, the player has not gone anywhere. So this year, 94th percentile in separation. Again, the feet just get him into acres of space. Just guys cannot keep up with him. He led the nation in missed tackles forced with 30. There's only Nick Nash who got that more, and he got it on like double the receptions that Luther Burden did. So even in limited spheres, he's forcing missed tackles. He's getting separation. 40% of his slot targets resulted in explosive plays, which is 15 yards or more. So again, once it's in its hands, it's going for a first down and it's going longer. And I watch him, and the same player is still there. This is just a team that was not as good this year. And specifically, the offense was a lot more disjointed than it was last year. When it comes to his technique, the route diversity is there. You see him on his crosses, his outs, his hitches, especially down out of the slot. He wins on all of them. He's just got the attributes to win all of his routes. He's been used more in the backfield. He's had a couple of rushing touchdowns this year. Obviously, they use some screens, end arounds, get the ball in his hands, get him moving. You even actually saw some Texas routes out the backfield as well. So he's a good technician. He's got the feet. He's got the hands. He's still got everything that made him that feared receiver last year. Again, the situation around him seems to really have affected him. And don't forget, he had 3 games of Drew Pine as well, who is a career journeyman, and he's not good at all. But the knocks on him when it comes to the draft, 1, the size, 5'11", 208. Is he just going to be a slot receiver for life? Now, granted, a lot of his best work at Missouri has come out the slot, but the amount, what you're asked to do in college, sometimes it's not a case of you can't do it. It's that you're not asked to do it. And there's not a lot of times he's asked to go downfield and make contested catches, etc. But he can do it. 3 of his 6 touchdowns this year came on throws over 20 yards, deep throws. And there was one in this South Carolina game. It was about a 30-yard pass into his bucket, over his shoulder, DB right on his hip, catches it, stops dead on a dime, 1 step inside. DB just goes spinning miles, puts him in an absolute blender, and he literally walks into the end zone. It is in his arsenal to be able to do it. He's just not been asked to do it as much. People knock him, they knock him on the route diversity. Now, what they mean by this is his work outside. He's got a very good go route. He's got the speed to be able to do it. But some of the more technical routes that you would run on the outside, he's simply not asked to do it. So it is not in his arsenal. So he needs to learn it as he goes. But I mean, for me, there's a confidence and a cockiness about him. Like when he's asked who he models his game on, he's like, I don't. People should model their game on me. Like, I like that confidence in a receiver. He's a big time recruit. He knows he is. And he's confident in his ability. And it's still there. So when it comes to Luther, as I say, at the next level, initially, you're going to be able to, I think you'll start using him on returns again in the NFL. I say Missouri never did it because he was their prized possession. It's not that he can't return anymore. It's that he wasn't asked to do it. So you're probably going to get a superstar returner off the bat. And you're going to get someone like Ayomanor, who's just very crafty, got a lot of guile to him. And, he's going to be a difference maker for you. And he could potentially be a wide receiver 1 going forward. And I think he can work on the outside as well. And you know me, I'm not a fan of comping. I don't like to comp. I like to believe a player is going to be the first version of him rather than somebody else. But there's another receiver who went through college who we're all very familiar with. Same size, same build, did a lot of his best work in the slot. Very dynamic playmaker, ball in his hands. You would absolutely not doubt him one bit. But when he got to the NFL, it made him work on the outside. He found a way to do it. The physicality got him there. His guile got him there. And he was a great receiver for many years. And Luther Burden's a more athletic version of him. Talking about Golden Tate here, it can be done. And I think he can be a juiced up, far more athletic version of what Golden Tate could be, but he's just got home run hit ability. So yeah, I don't agree with the knocks on him moving him downboards. People are stat watching here. I've watched the games from the 2 years. He is still the same player. It is just the situation around him that has changed. Somebody's going to get themselves a steal if he continues to fall. He should be a first-round pick. Screw that he's a slot, first guy. We mentioned we're breaking tropes in the NFL with wide receivers now. I still think he's great, and whether we were in the market for him, I don't know. Whether we're looking at receiver in round 1. I would certainly have a look in his direction. Maybe not the type of guy we need, but yeah, the future's very bright for Luther Burden. He's going to surprise a lot of people.
You watched any Luther Burden?
Yep, I have, and I completely agree with the assessment. Though my comp is a bit more recent, unfortunately, and it's also someone that we know very well because now he plays in rival colours. DJ Moore. Someone who was drafted as a slot receiver, made it work on the outside with a shocking Panthers offense. Do you remember when it was him and Curtis Samuel as their lead receivers way back when? Unfortunately, now he's still in a shitty situation with the Chicago Bears. But there's someone who very much is in that mold. And I've seen Panthers fans, when they've been mocked, Luther Burden in mock drafts, been going like, no, we don't need him, we don't want him. And I'm like, have you seen your offense? Like, the only reason that Bryce Young kind of broke out this past season, the second half, was because Adam Freeland worked out to be a receiver again. You need someone who can get open, get for him when the pressure's in his face. Luther Burden would be perfect for that. And I know it's to be a retread basically from 10 years ago with your rookie DJ Moore, but it's the perfect fit. If they don't go edge, Luther Burden should be a Carolina Panther.
I've seen a lot of stories to contrary. People think Bryce would love him, and I agree. He works with that type of receiver at Alabama. I think they would go like bread and butter, but I'm not buying the downgrades on him at all. I still think he's a really, really great player, and he will make a lot of people sorry if they let him fall.
I've only watched 2024 tape, and so I can only go off the down year compared to the sophomore tape. So I need to go back and watch 2023, basically. I just have a slightly lower opinion of him because all I've seen is him being great but not elite, I would say. Like, you watch him play and what he does do is very polished, but like you say, there's a lot for him to learn to go from what will be, at his floor, probably a productive wide receiver. But at the moment, I think if he doesn't develop, you are looking at... I mean, I don't want to say Debo, it's such a lazy take, but like, the way that I would make the most of Luther Burden if he didn't develop in terms of his route concepts is I would want to scheme him up touches in a gadget sort of way, even though he isn't a gadgety sort of guy. I think that you can scheme up touches for him, and I think that would really, really work well. The fact that he does so little out of the running back position, I know they line him up there sometimes, but they very rarely actually run him. And it's like, I think he'd be a great running back. He's 5'11", 210. Like, he's good with the ball in the hands. Give him some running back plays. And then I saw the Texas route in the Texas A&M game, which I thought was quite fun. And I was like, oh, he's just so good at that. So in the limited stuff that I've seen him do, I really like him. My fear, like with when we have a look at edge players who haven't developed things yet, is will he? And that's my big question with him, is he a guy who I think has still a pretty high floor because of what he can already do? Will he hit that ceiling is where I have that question. And so for me, that takes him down to somewhere near the bottom of the first at the moment, having not watched the 2023 tape, because I think that's where that sort of guy should go. And if he does hit that, then someone's going to absolutely hit the jackpot. And to be honest, if someone takes him in the mid-20s, they're still probably going to like what he is right now. So maybe he should go a bit higher than that just because of what he could be. But I think what he is going to work too. So that's where I kind of sit with Luther. And I just need to do more work, but there's so many guys to go through, I don't know if I'm ever going to get there. That's the problem. Oh, we've got Bailey in the chat as well, our resident Bears fan, who's saying that they need a wide receiver, but maybe with the few draft picks they have, they can't afford to go and get one up high. So maybe they'll take one of the guys that are going to go low that we've profiled tonight. But anyway, it's time, perhaps, unless anyone
keep their dirty hands off
Luther Burden.
Not off Live the Burden, off Ricky White. You can keep your dirty hands off.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Bailey did just ask a
that
question.
That would hurt more than the Richie Grant to the Falcons one. That sort of betrayal.
So Bailey did say who, in your opinion, in this draft class would be most similar to Amon-Ra and suit the role he played for you guys. I don't know if Amon-Ra is a comp that you would make for Ricky White, but
I don't do comps.
Generally.
I know. I don't. Who would be? No, I don't think so. I don't know. This might be me just trying to... I don't know. I'll have a think.
That's all right. No worries. Time for me to go now for my first guy. And he wasn't going to be my first guy, but having watched the guys that I have watched this week, he is going to be my first guy because I think it's going to go higher. And that is Matthew Golden out of Texas. Now, Golden is a big riser right now in this draft class. I think when we started this process, he was rumoured to be a late 2, early 3. He is now some people's wide receiver 1 in the entire class, and some respectable draft analysts have him as a top wide receiver over some other receivers, one that we talked about, like Luther Burden, but there are 2 others that started the process well above him in Emeka Ibuka and Tetrio Millen. Quite a few analysts have him now as the wide receiver 1 over those guys. So we are talking about one of the elite prospects in this draft. He's a true junior. He's 6', 195, PFF grade this year of 74. He is an X, 24% of the plays in the slot, 76 out wide, 6.5% drop rate, so he's got pretty reliable hands. So a transfer to Texas from Houston. In 2023 at Houston, in his final year there, he only played 9 games, 38 receptions for 404 yards and 6 touchdowns, but he also had 2 kick return touchdowns on 9 kick returns. So pretty electric with the ball in his hands. Then went to Texas, took the step up, and he did deliver for them. 16 games in their run, one of the larger resumes you ever see in college football, of course, now with the expanded playoffs. 58 catches for 987 yards, that's 17 yards per catch, and 9 receiving touchdowns. That led the SEC. This guy led the SEC in receiving touchdowns. Just putting that out there. I know the SEC didn't have a great year as a conference, but it's still maybe widely regarded to be the most competitive conference, and this guy had the most receiving touchdowns in it. Kick returns as well, he did take over and had 14 of them this year. 285 return yards, no returning touchdowns, but 20 yards per kick returns, pretty handy. Obviously, you know, college football, like, they barely return the ball most of the time. It's a fair catch, and you just walk out to the 25. So the fact that they allowed him to do that quite a bit, I think shows what skill and faith they had in him. So I watched 2 games of his. One against Georgia in the conference championship as maybe one of the harder defenses he had to play this season, PFF grade of 70.9, even though he had 162 receiving yards on 8 catches in that game. And then I had a bit of a look against Clemson, which was, I think, the game afterwards in the first round of the playoffs, which was his worst game of the season, PFF grade of 55.1, 2 catches for 49 yards. And overall, he's just a fascinating prospect. I mean, at 6'1", 195, he's not really the prototypical X wide receiver, despite the fact that the majority of his reps are coming on the outside. He's not big, he's not particularly tall, but the route running ability is off the chart. Like, he is very, very polished, lots of head fakes, the body control to kind of make people think he's going one way before turning them around, going the other way. He's just got all that nuance that you're looking for if you want to succeed on the outside with a bit of a smaller frame. His speed is electric. Golden is a sub 11 second 100 meter dash guy in college. Like, he is an absolute burner. And he's got great hands as well. So when you combine that route running ability with that speed and the ability to track the ball catching, I mean, you know, this guy's an elite deep ball threat, but his ball tracking is excellent. When you got a 6.5% drop rate, Texas are not shy at going for it right as an offense. Like, they will put the ball in harm's way sometimes. And, you know, he did some really, really good work there. So I can absolutely see why people have him as his wide receiver 1. He runs all of the routes. In these 2 games, I pretty much saw everything I'd want to see out of a prospect. So, you know, even though they only had 1 season at this sort of elite level, he already is kind of showing to me everything that I want to see. He can access all areas of the field. His better work actually comes deeper. So I think if you're putting him in the sort of shallower routes, crossing routes, all that sort of stuff, I think you might be taking away what he can do best. You know, just using him as a stretch vertical player. And I mean, that really means that he can be a threat at the X and Z specifically. I mean, hell, he's just going to be such a weapon in this environment that we live in, where versatility is going to be absolutely key. The thing for him is that despite being exceptionally nuanced, despite not... This is such a weird thing to me about Golden, is that when he's on, he's brilliant. But he will just go missing. And there's no lack of effort in these games. But in that Clemson game, they just had a good plan, whether that was that we're going to bracket him with one impress man and then have a bracket behind. But in some games, he just really struggled to create some separation against some of the better defenses he faced. Despite that speed, sometimes he just couldn't break free of the defense. And, you know, his better games this season came against Arizona State in the playoffs. But otherwise, his worst game was against against Oklahoma, apart from Clemson. And it's like, okay, he had a really bad game against Georgia as well. I have a question about what he's going to do about better defensive players who can look at his speed, see the way he works with his body control, and just be confident enough to walk out there going, I got you, and just make him beat you. I don't have the confidence potentially he can do that yet. A little bit of that is to do with frame, but even though he's an exceptionally nuanced player, he isn't always turning the better defenders around. It's not good enough sometimes. So what I'm looking for from him for the future isn't any sort of development in any sort of particular way, because the route running is there, the route tree is there, the speed is there. It's that sort of intangible ability that you can just win. And I can't explain it any other way than that. Amun-Ra has that, right? No matter what happens, he's going to go out there, he's going to win. And Golden doesn't quite have that yet. It's weird. I can't put my finger on what it is that's special about those receivers that just win. And if Golden gets that, he's going to be a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. Like, his ceiling is so high. But if he doesn't develop that, he's still going to be a pretty damn productive wide receiver when it comes to it. Because of his frame, because of his size, because of the way he wins. I've comped him to Calvin Ridley. I know that Ridley used to do a bit more of his production in the slot earlier on in his career before moving outside. But right now, I think that we would say that Calvin is probably a bit more of an outside wide receiver, especially with what he did most recently in his career. The way that he wins, I think, is the way that Golden wins. I think Golden's ceiling is potentially much higher than that. I mean, one thing about Golden maybe that hasn't put his best foot forward is Quinn Ewers. And I know that there is some pushback on Quinn Ewers not being shit, and that maybe he's better than some analysts have panned him for. There's no doubt when watching the tape that there are some balls which aren't recorded as drops because they're not catchable. And that's unmissable on tape. And, you know, some of that is the O-line not giving Ewers enough time. Some of it is Ewers just panicking. Some of it is Ewers just not being accurate sometimes. But maybe with a better better quarterback, the Golden can display a bit more of his true self. I'm not sure. Anyway, I have waffled enough on this guy, so I can see someone's biting his lip, so I'm going to go over to Anthony Fitzpatrick before he cuts my head off.
Let's stop with the Quinn Ewers slander, please.
I said he's better than some people said he was. What do you want me to say?
That he's good.
No, I can't lie to the people.
No, you can't tell truths to the people.
I must not tell lies.
See, for me, Matthew Golden is the proverbial, like, when a stranger come along and offers you sweets, like, he's the 10% chance he's a good guy and he's just going to give you really good sweets and he's going to be great. There's a 90% chance this is sinister. What Matthew Golden could be is
sick bastard.
I'm trying to say he's like the 1 in 10 chance that he is absolutely, like, phenomenal, and
maybe he has Skittles.
You know what? Yeah, maybe he does. But what you see from him, he's been tremendous. Now, when you're doing receivers and when you've got to look at this again, you've got to look at the situations guys are coming into, and you've got to understand why sometimes they start slow and why he maybe has only picked up why he's picked up momentum towards the end of the year in admittedly big games. Let's look at this Texas team, for example. Their top 5 pass catchers gone from last year. Most of them drafted. I mean, you had Xavier Worthy's in the NFL, Adonai Mitchell's in the NFL, Jatavian Sanders is in the NFL, no more Jonathan Brooks, he's in the NFL, Jordan Whittingham is as well. You're basically coming in to this year with an entire new receiver corps. Isaiah Bond comes in from Alabama. He comes in from Houston. Matthew Golden does. Ryan Wingo, the other good receivers, a true freshman. And you're coming into a system where you've got, at start, you've got Quinn Ewers throwing to you. Quinn gets hurt, so Arch comes in for a few games. You've got Arch throwing to you. Then Arch gets benched again, and Quinn comes back in and starts throwing. And you look, and that's a lot of time to have to settle into your team and develop with so much dysfunction there. With an entirely new wide receiver core, you've basically got Gunnar Helm in there, who didn't play that much last year. He has basically been a starter for the first time. And it all of a sudden makes sense. Like, for the first 5 games of the year, Isaiah Bond looked like an absolute stud, and then he didn't go over 50 yards a game for the rest of the season. That's when Matthew Golden started to pick up. That's when Wingo started to get a little bit better, and team cohesion's a real thing. And you've got to let these guys bed in, and as the season has gone on, you've seen him get more comfortable. He's gained more of a rapport with his quarterback. And what he's done again is nothing. You look at him, and I didn't think he would declare this year. He's declaring a year early as well. Like this is a really brave bet on himself, but like his development's been phenomenal.
Mm.
He's gone from a guy who wasn't a contested catch guy to now he is. Like he barely lost out on any aerial duels this year. He went up to get something, he'd get it. He'd make these big splash plays. He's got the speed, he's got the hands, he's got the technique. I mean, this is again starting experience as well. He's not played the most at Houston either, but the rate he's developing is phenomenal, and that's why his rise is so big. He is a legitimate bona fide prospect, and if he carries on doing what he's doing, got a decent frame, 6 foot, he's not too small. You can deploy him pretty much anywhere you want in any system you want. Um, that's what is so enticing about him. It's just you balance it against the amount of football he's played, and obviously he's not had a chance to have any consistency. And now he's coming up to the NFL, and the level of opposition is just going to go straight through the roof again. So he's having to adjust again. But history's shown he can do it, and history's shown that he is a rapidly developing player. And there's just going to be a lot of flaws in there at the minute. It's the raw aspect of him, which is the issue. Like he's going to go and slay the combine, more than likely going to slay the combine. Some people are going to get really excited. And honestly, he has the potential to be like a first round guy. Certainly, if he had one more year in college under his belts and had 1,000-yard year, you'd be talking a top 15 prospect here.
Oh, he'll be a top 10 prospect after the combine. There's no doubt people will be talking about him as a top 10 pick.
It's is he going to do it for you in the NFL? And that's like you've got to take a chance here, and there's a chance that it could be bad, but there's just that little chance that he could be absolutely fantastic and could be great. Which is why I find him so polarizing. Like I just want to say like no, just flitter that idea off to the side, and then like the idea keeps pushing its way back in, and I'm like no, and. With some prospects, you just get that. You're like, I can see what you are. I can see what you can be. Can you do it consistently for me at the next level? And I think he will. Again, it's a lazy thing, but it's where does he land? Who does he land with? You feel like it'd be good for him to have sort of a vet quarterback to work with who could show him the ropes, who can earn his trust and just get him there. But there's no doubt there's a super, super high ceiling for him, which is what makes him such an intriguing prospect. I have no idea where he's going to get taken right now, but I fancy it might be on the higher side.
Ash, all that glitters is golden.
Yeah, well done. I like that. It's good. But yeah, anyone would develop contested catch skills when they're having to catch flimsy balls from Quinn Ewer's baby hands. Like I'm predicting right now, Quinn Ewers is going to have Kenny Pickett hands because I've watched a bit of Quinn Ewers tape the past couple of days, and for every one good throw you get from him that's really on point, you have 10, 15 that aren't. It just suggests he's just not getting the grip on the ball. But that's bearing the lead for a couple of weeks when we do the QBs. Having watched Golden, mislead most of the stuff I've seen of Golden is that playoff run that everyone was watching. There is a damn good receiver in there, and yeah, he's fastly rising. And I don't remember too much about Houston's offensive system, but I don't think it was very good considering he wasn't using someone of this talent. And then he comes to Texas, and everyone was thinking, Isaiah Bond, you've just seen Xavier Worthy get drafted by the Chiefs. Here's the next one. And some people do have that comparison for him. But it's Golden, who's now at the end of the season's come out and been the big receiver there. And yeah, he's going to stay the combine. He's going to get picked in the first round for sure. But yeah, it is about where he goes, because if he doesn't go to the right system, who doesn't have that kind of QB can help him. So honestly, in my mind right now, Rams, Chargers.
So the Rams are the really team that occurred to me, but I just don't see him getting to 26. I just don't.
Who knows what LA are going to do with the pick they're going to get for the first round pick they're going to get from the Matthew Stafford trade. But hey ho, yeah, just someone like that. If he goes to Denver, for instance, which is possible. I know everyone is connecting them with a certain tight end who certain members of the panel does not like at all. He could flame out, but then again, that happens. Look what happens with Josh Reynolds, for instance. Tim Patrick now with us. Sometimes, especially with the pros now, it's getting more and more common that some players who are like this break out with their second team because they're able to choose a bit more. Instead of getting picked by the team, they get to pick the team and they choose the perfect system for them. Suddenly, 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, that kind of thing. So Golden is someone that we should definitely keep an eye on the draft, but also keep an eye on after the 6-7 years down the line, after he's come off the rookie contract, his second contract, if it's on another team, he could be someone we're looking at as a late bloomer that is becoming one of the new norms in the NFL.
The Tankathon has him going 29 at the moment to Washington, which one is a great fit, and two, no, because I'd like him at 28 if he fell there. I think that would be really, really cool. I know that people are going to hate.
There's a team picking one in front of us who might be very interested in the likes of him, speedster, who can stretch the field, and they do need a receiver.
The Ravens?
Yeah.
Do they?
Him back?
Yeah.
They need that kind of... So they've got, say, Flowers in the slot. Rashad Bateman's kind of broke out at the X. Matthew Golden at their Z position would be...
They don't have a Matthew Golden on that team, and they need someone who can spread the field, and they need someone who can, because Lamar can keep plays going. You want a contested catch guy who can go up and get a few of these that he throws down there, especially with the physical nature of the teams they play against, the Chiefs, the Bills, these guys. Like he a little weapon that could unlock them. So I would say that would be the floor for him potentially.
So I think my best fit for him is the Chargers at 22. They're desperate for a wide receiver. I think Herbert with his arm is going to make the best use of him.
Grant's going there. Kenneth Grant's going there.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. So
put money on that. You will make a rich man out of that. I will tell you now, unless they go free agency for a big DT, you can pencil in Kenneth Grant to the Chargers right now.
Yeah, so 21 to Pittsburgh makes a lot of sense as well. 19 to Tampa Bay is going to go underrated because Chris Godwin looks like he's moving on, so they need someone at that position. 13 to the Dolphins is also underrated as well. If Tyreek Hill does move on, they love going wide receiver in the draft, especially in the first round. They just do.
As the resident Steelers expert, I can tell you they're going running back this year. So...
Fair. In that case, what about a team who has a really good QB, but for some reason they're not keeping free agents who, the external the free agents they have, they're letting them go, and it's slowly depleting his wide receiver core. Like, they've got a guy. No, Cincinnati. They're probably going to lose T. Higgins. So
they're tagging him, aren't they?
Tag and trade is supposedly the big thing. They don't want to sign him long term, so they're going to tag and trade him. In which case, he's got Jamar Chase, who won the Triple Crown, and Yoshivas. That's about it, because Jermaine Burton has not worked for them. There's their Jermaine Burton replacement.
And the other one I thought of was San Francisco at 11. If they do let Debo go, then they've only got one. Well, it depends what you think about Juwan Jennings. They've got one elite wide receiver, and they've got one good wide receiver.
I love Juwan Jennings.
No, I know you do.
No,
he's a
their good receiver is the one that I don't draft in fantasy, so you will have to wait for that. So, Debo last year, and of course Juwan Jennings gets everything. So, if I draft Juwan Jennings this year, then he's not going to be good.
Please don't.
All right, that is Matthew Golden. We turn to Ash for his second player.
Well, Ant mentioned him earlier.
Matthew Golden, sorry. Said Juwan Jennings, didn't I? God damn it. Never mind. Sorry. You carry on.
Well, Ant mentioned him earlier, and to spoiler alert myself, my pro comp for him is a faster Juwan Jennings. So let's go with the wide receiver out of Ole Miss, Trey Harris. So Trey Harris is a 6'3", 210-pound redshirt senior receiver from Ole Miss, wears number 9. He spent 3 years at Louisiana Tech, so 2020 to 2022, and in the past 2 seasons at Ole Miss. This season, PFF gave him an 89.7 offensive grade, 89.4 receiving, 70.9 drop grade, 28.6 fumble grade, and a 76.1 run blocking grade. He played 366 offensive snaps this season. He did miss multiple games with a lingering hip/groin injury. Of those snaps, one was in the backfield, one was as an inline tight end, 38 were in the slot, and 326 were out wide. He got 60 catches on 76 targets for 1,030 yards, 7 touchdowns, which is a 149.5 passer rating when targeted. He had a 7.7% drop rate, a 61.5 contested catch success rate. He forced 11 missed tackles. He had 3 penalties on him, and he did fumble twice. He unfortunately had no special team snaps, which is sad because I love my special teamers. And I watched his game this year against Kentucky, where he got a 70.9 offensive grade, a 70 flat receiving grade, and a 62.7 run blocking grade. He got 11 catches on 15 targets for 176 yards and 1 touchdown. In that game, he had he was used out wide on 75.7% of his snaps, in the slot on 21.6%, and then he was in line for 2.7%. This was his one snap at inline tight end. In the game, he had an 8.3% drop rate and an unfortunate 0% contested catch rate. So he is a very, very productive receiver. So obviously this year he broke out and then unfortunately had the injuries. But before that, he had back-to-back 900 plus yards and 8 plus touchdown campaigns. So his last year at Louisiana Tech and his first at Ole Miss. So this is, again, someone who's very productive. You know what you're kind of getting out of him. But there are lingering medical red flags about the injury. So it obviously ruled him out for a large part of the season. Then he played again and then it crops up back again. And so recently it's still there because he wasn't healthy enough to run routes at the Shrine Bowl. So someone who's the combine is going to be big for in one way, in that the medical tests are going to be a big part of it because it really will affect him. If it's still lingering there, it's going to tank his grade, unfortunately. And missing part of the season meant he missed playing some of the better teams. So the reason I say that is because 534 of his yards, that's over half of them, came in his 3 games against Furman, Middle Tennessee, and Georgia Southern. So he beat up on the bad teams, did well against Kentucky, but against some of the better teams, wasn't as productive. And maybe one of the reasons for that is he does not have a diverse route tree, unfortunately. Most of his snaps were either a go route, a screen, a slant, or a hitch. He doesn't really have a diverse route tree. He kind of is getting he will have the same knocks that Dontario Drummond had a couple of years ago with Matt Corral, that AJ Brown had when coming out, say, with DK Metcalf. They scheme their best receivers up, but it's to a detriment to them when it comes to the draft because you just don't know what they're like running the full route tree. So it's something you might have to be taught. But there are definite good things about him. So I actually, for someone who usually doesn't run digs, I found his dig routes his best. Like, he was absolutely great at them. So there was one where he runs it to it's a 15-yard dig. He just gets open at the right time. As soon as he gets the ball, bursts upfield quickly. And unfortunately, he's tackled at the one. He was this close to getting a touchdown on it, but just consistently running them and drag routes as well. So there was one where he ran a drag route and a mesh concept, really good route, but just unfortunately was not able to pull away from the defender and so didn't convert the 3rd down. But he's a damn good receiver, and not just with the sort of scheme stuff. On the scramble drills where Dart's having to move around, get out the pocket, he was always trying to get open and come back to the football. And if he doesn't get it, he always blocked for the guy who did if he was close, trying to help out as best as he can. And for someone else who says he doesn't run much, many very varied routes, there was a post route he ran in this where it was just overthrown on him, even though the safety and corner were quite close. But again, just a really good route from him. But that's the only time you really saw it from him. And he has a good release package against press. So consistently, he's using this stutter step sort of motion. So the corner's having to guess which side is going. As soon as the corner shows the leverage, he bursts the opposite way and suddenly he's got a yard or two on them. So I think he did it a couple of times to someone who Lions fans probably heard a lot about recently, Maxwell Hairston, the Kentucky cornerback from Detroit. The kind of guys he's going up against, and he was beating quite regularly. But there are some knocks to him, obviously the route tree, and a lot of the time where if it was an RPO or screen to him and it just wasn't thrown to him, he would legit just stand there in his stance, not doing anything. He would just, it was almost as if he was throwing, like someone's pressed pause on him. It's like the movie Click with Adam Sandler in, just gone pause on him and he's not moving. bit of a lack of effort there. And the same with run blocking. There were some absolutely great run blocking snaps from him. There was some where I'm just like, why did you let your guy go, Pat? Like, why did you let your guy go? Now he's gone and tackled your running back. So what would have been a 10-yard gain, suddenly a 4-yard gain. Like, there's stuff that needs to be trained into him, not only the route tree, but also the effort on the run blocking, because he's definitely got the frame for it. Like 6'3", 210 pounds, he can lay people out. He's just not doing it enough for me, unfortunately. So, as I mentioned earlier, my comparison for him is a faster Juwan Jennings. They're very similar heights and weights, and they would play very similar roles in the NFL as a wide receiver 3 who plays the X, plays the big slot. But while Jennings run a 4.72 40-yard dash, I'm projecting Harris to be, if he can run, a high, low to mid 4.4 range kind of guy. So we're talking like 4.2, 4.42, 4.43, 4.6 kind of speed, where he just has that burst. But also Jennings is a much better run blocker. That's his known for. As we mentioned earlier, Jennings is a bit of a nasty bastard, which is one of the reasons I love him. And obviously his best fit is that big slot role X, using his speed and physicality to beat corners both outside the ashes and then over the middle in the intermediate to deep game. Again, the Josh Reynolds kind of routes. So right now on our consensus board, Harris is the 5th ranked wide receiver, the 39th overall ranked prospect. I have him graded lower than that for 2 reasons. The way he was used at Ole Miss and the injury. Like, he could certainly prove me wrong. He could be like AJ Brown. He could be able to run a full route tree. But as we just mentioned with Golden, until we see it, I can't say for sure it's going to happen. So if the medicals come back clear and he has a good combine, he could rise back up to sort of that top of the second round kind of range where he currently is. But right now, because of the medical knocks, because of the limited route tree, he's not someone I'll be comfortable with until, around about 60. If we go edge, interior defensive line at 28, and it comes around to 60 and he's there, there's a potential future starting X for the next however many years with Amara in the slot, JMO, DZ. There's your wide receiver trio set for the next potentially like 10 years.
And Trey Harris, what do you think?
There's certain players that, when me and Ryan, who've done the college pod for that many years now, that we talk about them that much that the other person vicariously almost starts to love them. And Trey Harris is one of those. I know he absolutely loves him to death. And I can see why. First of all, let's give a big shout out to Louisiana Tech, mate. Like Amit Robertson, Milton Williams, Trey Harris, like, school produces some dudes, even though they don't do much themselves down there in the CUSA, but it's becoming a little bit of a lineage program. But Trey Harris he's my type of player. I like, receivers who just will go up, catch balls, they're physical, they're ruthless, and they just want to bully you into submission. But, he's got the finesse with it as well when he wants. I mean, he caught 80% of his targets this year. Contested catch outside receivers just don't catch that much because so much of what's thrown their way is impossible to get. The contested catch rates are right down. His are up there. He's one of the most sure-handed he's one of the most surefire pair of hands you'll find as a contested catch guy. And yeah, the knock is his speed. The knock is sometimes the effort on certain plays, but for me, I look past that because what he brings you is just like he'll kick your ass like DK Metcalf will. He'll run through you. The amount of times you see him try to get tackled and it takes 2, 3, 4 guys to bring him down. When he gets ahead of steam, that's it. Yeah, you're going to struggle. He's going to get yak after the catch. And he's just physically dominant, and there is a need for that type of receiver in the NFL still. Not every receiver needs to have breakneck speed. Some guys just need to be able to punch a DB back and say, this is mine, you're not having it, especially with, DBs are placing a lot more effort on physicality now, going up, roughing these receivers up, and a lot of guys struggle with it. Trey Harris is not going to. And he just, again, he has some of the traits some of these other guys don't when it comes to the strength, when it comes to the build. And yeah, he's limited in some aspects. Obviously, he doesn't do a lot of work out the slot, so the route tree's a little underdeveloped. And it depends what a team's going to draft him for. Like some teams going to draft him and use him as a multi-purpose weapon. Some teams will draft him with the case of like, go out there, BRX, go be our guy out there, and he will carry on being that guy, and that'll leave a ceiling which is not as high as some of the others. But in terms of looking at him as a prospect, I think he deserves to be in that fringe first round consideration, depending on, what some of the other guys like people think of like Golden and Ibuka and guys like that, whether they're up there as well, might dilute the draft because obviously not that many receivers are going to go uber high, but there's not many people like him in that top tier consideration. Like a lot of these guys, like Ibuka's small, speedy, Burden, small, speedy. Tet obviously is going to go in the top 5. You're looking at guys out there, but there's in the sphere around him, he's got the distinct advantage of being one of the better big guys out there, one of the better contested catch guys out there. So, his name's going to get called round to quite happily. Whereabouts, I'm not sure. Maybe at the end of day one if someone really wants a receiver, but I like him, and he's just old-fashioned football, which is what I really like. And that's what I've always liked my receivers. Sometimes I stay old-fashioned in the way of things.
Don't have anything to add, so and I am going to be passing back to you for your second man, and you have 2 really good ones to choose from. So who is it?
I do. These are 2 guys that I've been enamored over in some time. I'll do him first. I've done the video on him today, but Ricky White, the wide receiver out of UNLV. This was the team I specifically liked before him, and it's just over time I've been enamored with some of these prospects out of there. For me, Ricky White's like the most Lionsy ready guy out there, the type they're looking for. I just absolutely love everything he brings to the game. As I say, if you want to see more, just ask for my breakdown. It's an hour breakdown. It's good stuff. He's 6'1", 190 pounds, 2-time team captain on that Rebel side, which is something the Lions do value. Captaincy there, you do have to take a look in there. In terms of his stats, so he's a 4-year collegiate guy. Spent his first year at Michigan State and then transferred down to UNLV, where he's spent the last 3 years. And I mean, what a journey the program's had. When he got there the last year under Marcus Arroyo, they've been a terrible team for a very long time. He goes there, had 622 yards in his first year, and then when Bob Odom came into the picture, this team has just completely revitalized itself to the point it's one of the best teams in the group of 5 now, and certainly had one of the most devastating offenses over the last 2 years. He racked up 1,500 yards in 2023. He's racked up over 1,000 again this year. In total, 227 receptions, 3,364 yards at just a smidge under 15 yards per reception, and 24 touchdowns offensively minded as well. There's he does run a little bit, and he's got some special teams to work as well. So just some of the accolades of him while he's been there. So his first team All Mountain West this year as a wide receiver. He was the 2024 Mountain West Special Teams Player of the Year. No one in the conference was better. And why was that? 4 blocked field goals. One of them he returned for, 4 blocked punts. One of them he returned for a touchdown. Another punt, which was a turnover on downs because he got to the punter so quick he had to put it back in his hands and got tackled, and turnover on downs. And he had a safety he scored against Hawaii as well. And there's just a bunch of other tackles and that he's had there. This guy is a special teams menace. And I absolutely love that about him. He's got the school record for most receiving yards in a season, that 1,500-yard year. That was a record that had stood for nearly 50 years. And he's the first Rebel ever to have more than 1,000-yard season. So maybe the barometer is not so high here, but this is a team that traditionally has not produced great wide receivers, especially at the NFL level, and he's gone there and he's made it work. And what do I like so much about him and his fit for the Lions? This is all down to one guy, and anyone who listens to College Pod will know exactly who I mean right away, and that's his offensive coordinator, Brennan Marion, and the system he runs. So at UNLV the last 2 years, they've run what is called the Go-Go offense, which was created by Brennan Marion himself. It's a high-tempo, downhill rushing offense interspersed with passing in there. So basically, it's a hybrid They use old school triple option run looks with a modern spread concept. So the idea is you run the ball quite a lot down the middle, you break a team down, but you've got receivers on the outside who are capable of hitting at all three levels, hitting those deep balls that the spread's all about, and then also getting the ball out your quarterback's hands early if the run's getting stuffed up. So you need to be good short, intermediate, and long. But most importantly, you need to be a good run blocker. And you will ask to get blocked again and again and again. And that's why his stats sort of go up and down while he's there. His production can vary from time to time. You don't see the 100-yard games all the time, the big games, specifically because in some games, he simply has to block all the time. In some games, he might get 20, 30, 40 yards, but he still had a big impact on that game. And as far as the Lions, requisites for what they need to do, I mean, it's the first thing. You need to be able to block. You need to be able to work in more of a complicated offense where there is a lot of running, but you need to be diverse as a receiver as well. He plays on the outside, but he has a nice sort of slot usage as well. It's 72 to 28 in terms of him working on the outside, but they use him in the slot when they need to. They use him on the outside a lot, but a lot of the time he's just blocking. His blocking is fantastic. And the game I, specifically watched for this was when they played Syracuse this year. So again, got to take extenuating circumstances into account for those who don't know. Syracuse, Power 4 team. He plays Group of 5 team. They had 2 victories over Power 4 teams this year, and they nearly beat Q's as well. But the real impressive thing about this, again, for those who don't know, with UNLV this year, their starting quarterback, Matthew Sluka, quit on them after 4 weeks because of NIL issues. They said he hadn't paid them, etc. So they had to change quarterback after the first month of the season. This was played in week 6. They changed quarterback in week 4. So he's playing with Elic Williams, who was an FCS transfer, who played 1 game in the FBS in his entire career. And this was his first ever game against Power 4 opposition. So Ricky Williams, with a brand new quarterback, he's trying to, garner a bond with in this type of environment, and he's still able to go on. And this game, he's able to put them to the sword. He has 10 catches on 11 receptions for 135 yards and a touchdown. But what is it that's so great about him? Like I say, the blocking here, he blocks from the perimeter. The screen blocking, he gets, so many times he's getting guys out to the perimeter, throwing them onto the sideline. He'll come inside on the slot. He'll do double tandem blocks on the bigger linebackers and the safeties. He'll run lead blocker from the fullback position occasionally as well. Like they ask him to do a lot, but as a receiver, he's just got some great qualities. The IQ is there. The footwork is phenomenal, and I can't say this highly enough. His stutter step is something to behold. The amount of times he uses it, he just gets the DB off balance, and then they're toast. One wrong step, he's gone. He's got the short area speed to get a ton of separation from these guys, and then he's free. And then the yards after catches, you can see it nearly 15 yards per completion his entire career. He's got a lot of big playability downfield. Let's say there's the toughness. The amount of missed tackles forced, again, is quite high with him. Once you get him into the field, the footwork's able to get him there. And he's very tough from all his blocking work. So, he can take 2, 3 guys along with him, get those extra yards. He converts a 3rd down in a situation on his own 7-yard line where the quarterback basically throws a huge screen out to him on the perimeter. And he's got a DB about 3 yards away from him. And his back is to the 1st down marker. He's 3 yards short. He sticks his foot down inside as though he's going to try and cut back inside and get the yardage there. The DB slows, takes 1 step in, and he just flips on a dime, hits the outside, causes the DB to lose leverage. He's able to sort of grab him, but he's not got the momentum, and he's able to carry him over the line to convert, just to move the chains. And in, these sticky situations in the NFL, when you need 3, 4 yards in these tough situations, he is the exact kind of guy you want for that. His hands are phenomenal. Like, there's catches that are getting fired into him right over his head at a rate of knots because, again, him and the QB are still trying to get to know one another. Doesn't drop a thing. The screen passes where he's having to come back, take catches away from the ball, running backwards, and then make plays going forward, and he does. But the footwork's great. The contested catchability with him's great. The blocking's fantastic. And I can't really say more in like a 5-minute segment on him here than I can on an hour's, review of him, but he's got everything you want as a line. As I say, the former captaincy, he's built up from the smaller school. He's shown it against the Power 4 opposition. He does all the blocking. He's a threat at all 3 levels. And the yak ability, you can just move him around and do so much with him. So, Ricky White he's one of my biggest draft crushes out there. This is not Puka vibes. He's not that type of guy. He's just, he's going to be special. And I think you can just use him as an all-round gadget guy and do so much with him. But certainly the attitude's there, which is the main thing. He's kept his nose clean in college. There's no attitude issues, no issues whatsoever. I don't know why he's not predicted higher. I'm firmly of the opinion he's going to go in day 2. He should go day 2, even if he's coming from a school that's not known for the talent at that position. The system he works, the IQ he has, he's got everything you want. So Ricky White, the third, out of UNLV. Yeah, please, Dan, just give me 1.
Ash?
I love him too. Of course I do. Special teamer, ex-receiver. Seems like my wet dream, doesn't it? Really does. And funny enough, I was Googling, doing some searching. The UNLV Rebels have produced one receiver before who in the NFL has had a 1,000-yard season, and he did it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And now he's in the division because he's the Minnesota Vikings wide receiver coach, Keenan McCardle. Ricky White will be better than Keenan McCardle. Keenan McCardle won 2 Super Bowl rings, was in 2 Pro Bowls. Ricky White, if he comes here, is getting 4 Super Bowl rings, 7 Pro Bowls, 3 All-Pros. He's going to lead the NFL in touchdowns one season. All this. I love the guy. And we know our day 3 receivers who should have gone a lot higher. Puka Nacua a couple of years ago. 2 years ago, we said Rome Odunze, if he came out, would be a great pick then. And then obviously he went to the Bears at 10 last year. Ant knows his receivers who get projected day 3 should go a lot higher. Ricky White is this year's one.
Yeah, Ant has been raving about him for some time, so I went and watched the one game that was available at the time on Caddies, and you just fall in love with the guy. You can't not. He's just one of those guys that make you excited to watch the game. That's what he's about.
There's literally one play where he's meant to be on a screen. He has to come back for the ball, and he catches the ball with his back to a DB. He hip tosses a DB. He turns. He sticks his foot in field and takes the cornerback out the equation, leaves him for dead. Sticks his foot in the ground again, takes out a linebacker and a D end, and then hits a gap and gets about another 5 or 6 yards. And it's like, happens in the blink of an eye. Like, footwork's insane. Like, for some of these guys, it's just like, you look and you're like, some of the top prospects can't do this sort of stuff. Like, I don't get it. I really don't. I actually love it. I don't know if you've seen his Q's punt blocks, but like, the punter's not even got the ball out his hands before he gets to the punter. Twice, he blocks a punt and he's looking down at it. He's not even having to dive for the damn thing. It's stupid. No team blocked more than 4 punts in college football this year. He did it on his own, and he had technically a 5th was a turnover, so 5 block punts on his own.
Sometimes he tips off run or pass by how hard he runs. That's the only thing I could think of. Sometimes he doesn't run as hard during his run plays as he does during his pass plays, which sometimes could tip off a defense. That is scraping the barrel when it comes to negatives. I was waiting for a second video just to kind of confirm what I've seen, and the grade I've got for him is just not fair, because I think he's just better than that. I put him at the top of the 3rd, which is significantly above consensus, but there's no reason why you wouldn't take a chance on this guy, maybe at the top of the 2nd. He's just got it. He really does. He does everything that you want him to do. And he's just fun. Sometimes you want to watch your football team because, man, football can be fun sometimes. This is a guy which does that. Like,
Yeah.
let's have some fun playing the game, guys.
I'd love to see the concept used more, man. Like you can mesh triple option with modern day football and just you watch the plays like they're funky, but you can do so much with it. That's why the offense is so good. You don't know if the quarterback's going to run it, where one of the two fullbacks is going to run the damn thing, whether you're going to toss it downfield to your star receiver. You have no idea, and it should be used more. Like I say, he's going to be a head coach at a big school one day, very big school.
I was going to go one step further. I was going to say within 5 years, he's going to be at least an OC at the NFL level.
Probably is.
I love Brendan Marion.
Yeah, probably is. Like some of the old-fashioned teams who like to run the ball first and like it would probably work here with us in some capacity if he wanted to do it down the line. But when Sac State come up to the FBS, he's just going to go up on every single person's radar. He won't be in secret much longer.
Mm-hmm.
All right, time for me to take over for my second guy, and this is another highly rated guy. I didn't go too low for my first two. This is the Stanford standout, Elic Ayomanor. He is a redshirt sophomore. Sorry, Ant, was my pronunciation bad?
Elic Ayomanor.
Thank you. Man bad at this. Watch things with no sound. Redshirt sophomore, so he's coming out early. He's 6'2", 210, PFF grade this year, 74.1. This year at Stanford, 63 catches for 831 yards and 6 touchdowns. Last year at Stanford, 62 for 1,013 and 6 touchdowns. So remarkably consistent. He is an X, and he will play the X at the NFL level. Almost 87% of his snaps come out wide, with only 13% in the slot. He does have an 8.7% drop rate, which is one of the higher ones of the people that we are looking at today, which is not ideal. But that said, I don't think he necessarily has a problem with drops. Sometimes they can just be concentration things, but it's not a high enough rate that it gives me any cause for concern in particular. I'm just having a look now to see if there's anything in particular that I did not see when I was doing my statistical look at him, because compared to Ash, I have not looked at this too much on PFF. But anyway, no, never mind. All good. So I watched 2 games of his versus Colorado and at NC State. The Colorado game, I need to double check whether I've actually written that down right, because that seems completely insane. 2023 Colorado tape. 13 catches for 294 yards and 3 touchdowns. Whew. Stanford came back from 29 to nothing down in that game to win 46-43 in double overtime. So it's a pretty fun game to go and watch. The NC State game was this year. He was 4 catches for 108 yards and a touchdown in a very good, very fun game. I believe that NC State ran away with that one, but Stanford, well, they were shockingly bad, and he was exceptionally good in a bad performance. I think, if I remember rightly, the Stanford quarterback coughed it up 3 times for touchdowns, either through sack fumbles or through picks. So it's the reason why they lost that game. Anyway, Elic, something that Ant said. I can't even remember how to say his name. He's a really interesting prospect in the draft for several reasons. One, just being that even at his height and weight, he's extremely polished as a route runner. Hooks and goes, slants, shallow crosses, comebacks, deep ins and outs, fades, posts, corners were all shown just in these 2 games. Like, all you need to see is these 2 games over 2 years, and he's put basically everything I want to see on tape in terms of his ability to go this way and that from different alignments. Even in the slot, you seem to do some really good work. Although I put in shallow crosses in there, and again, he can do that, I do think his best work is a bit deeper down the field, because he's a very speedy guy, and his route running best shows up when he can make fools of defenders and then really burn them for pace when he's turned them around. He's got excellent hands and body control, which means that if you're putting it in his catch radius, he's going to snag it. And at 6'2" and with long arms, his catch radius is bigger than most. He's also a plus asset in the run game, enthusiastically blocks, seems to really enjoy putting defenders on their backside, has good technique with it. If he sees that a cornerback has switched off from a play, he's going to put him on the floor, which is just entertaining. To me, he's a bit of a dick, but in a really good way. I mentioned the NC State game and that NC State kind of ran away with it. Some of his best work was in garbage time, but NC State weren't sitting off them. They weren't playing, bracketed cover 4 quarters coverage and really playing prevent. NC State didn't want to give up another point, and Stanford continued to come back at them. They were running lots of fourth downs, and I was really impressed by the mentality of the team and by him. I think he put up 2 touchdowns in the last 10 minutes of that game when they were 30 points back or something like that. So, even when there are lost causes, he doesn't lose faith. He really kind of puts in a huge amount of effort. Just having a look, I wrote a really short summary on him, so I'm going to kind of read some of the bullet points I have in here. So, potentially lacks a little bit of explosion off the line. He's got a really, really good top speed, but I'm not sure whether his 10-yard split is going to be exceptional. I think that's one of the reasons why I thought he was a better deep ball player than he was in the shorter areas. His quarterback wasn't the best, and that may have held him back. Ashton Daniels, so this was 2023 anyway. Beat his man several times deep, and the quarterback just misses him. This was in the 294-yard game. Some was left on the field for him. There was one particular rep where he was talking to the sideline and just missed the snap happening. The snap happened, and he was just watching like he was talking to his guys on the sideline. That was just weird. I don't know whether he was trying to communicate what to do on the rep with his coach or what. But the play happens. He's not aware of it. So, don't know. Really nice sudden cut ability. He does just manage to drive and create separation by having that sort of sharp ability you want to see. This game featured a 97-yard receiving touchdown by him. So, when he does catch a ball, creates a little bit of separation, where that acceleration isn't fantastic. If he does hit his top speed, he's going to take the top off. So, if you are going to tackle him, you better make it quick. He beat his man on a slot fade, so stopped on a dime to catch the cutback in field and then beats everyone to the pylon for a 60-yard touchdown. So he had a 97 and a 60-yarder in the same game. Comeback route, cut hard and created plenty of separation for it. He did a fake slant that completely fooled the cornerback, but the throw missed him again. Contact balance is really good. Got hammered on another slant and just held onto the ball. Ability to kind of take the ball on hitches and quick passes and just turn it upfield's really, really good. Another slot fade, the first play of overtime, a slot fade 30-yarder caught over the cornerback. So he can body people in the sort of way that you want bigger wide receivers to do. And this was 2023. 2024, on a run play, he noticed the cornerback not paying attention and knocked him on his ass. It was awesome. He loves seeming to kind of get downfield to that second level and hit people like linebackers. He really wants to be a part of what the offense is doing, so that's really good. Scramble drill, he's very good at that too. He's very acutely aware of what his quarterback can and can't see and tries to get in the eye line, but also create some space. Got a good feel for where the holes are in zone. Turns a go into a post and the movement was so subtle, he just created lots of room because the safety didn't even notice it. Another double move where he burned Aiden White for pace. Good catch with nice hands deep on the sideline. Another good corner route. Excellent explosion out of his breaks. And then hesitation on another. So fake slants must be a thing for him. So he ran a fake slant fade and kind of went in and then came back out. And the hesitation on it that just broke the ankles of the corner. Exceptional. So to go back into the summary, he's a day one starter for basically any team in the league. Plus weapon in the red zone. He'll go and get it. He's going to be a weapon with fades, with slants, which is why doing a fake slant fade is so important for him. But with the nuance of double moves and that sort of thing, he's able to access the field at any level. Very polished, no concerns about beating press or anything like that. Honestly, I don't think he has to improve particularly much to be a really good receiver in the NFL. I don't know how much more the ceiling can go up for him. Right now, I've got him as a solid 1. I think he'll be a top 20 player in this draft when it's all said and done. He's got a way to go in terms of rising. I think the combine will be good for him because he's got that speed. Maybe the 10-yard split time won't be fantastic, but I think potentially because he can drive on his brakes, that the shuttle will be good for him, and the 40-yard dash will be a good thing for him too. With the hands, I expect him to be excellent at the catching drills too. He'll put his best foot forward, and he's going to fit everyone. Everyone needs a guy like this. Boys, over to you.
I love him too. Like, it's just the background. And obviously, we've got the connection to we've got the connection to him because, of course, excuse me. My love for him is so much. It's making me choke up with tears. We've got the connection to him, obviously, because David Shaw was the head coach at the time he was recruited to Stanford. He unfortunately had to redshirt his 2022 season, so Shaw's last because of injury. But he's recruiting a guy, obviously he's from Canada as well, so he was relatively new to the game of football, relatively to everyone else. But he was a star track athlete at high school, so at his, I think it's Deerfield Academy in Massachusetts, set records in the 100 and 200 meters, was top 10 recruit in his class in the state of Massachusetts, had offers from Stanford, obviously, but also Cal, Notre Dame, Tennessee, Ole Miss. Those last 3, pretty notable for producing receivers. Like, obviously, Notre Dame produced a certain podcast receiver who's also a very, very good backup receiver in the league and is never going to amount to much, but at least he likes ragging on the city of Detroit on Twitter. And then, obviously, Tennessee and Ole Miss are 2 pretty good offensive schools. Obviously, Tennessee, Hendon Hooker came from there, Jalen Hyatt, etc. And Ole Miss, we just had Trey Harris, AJ Brown's confirmed DK Metcalf. So this is a really good guy. Plus, he earned plus points because you mentioned the catch in the overtime again in 2023 against Colorado. Do you remember who the cornerback he was, who he mossed?
No.
Travis Hunter.
Really?
It was Travis Hunter. He mossed Travis Hunter.
Love it.
So he went up against presumptive number 1 overall pick, Mr. Star cornerback, wide receiver, does everything. This guy came and mossed him, and I agree. He should be a first-round pick, but yet he's people's wide receiver 8 because
it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen with the NFL.
I know.
They know better than that.
They definitely do, and he's going to be like, he's up there with Ricky White for me, as in if he goes to any of the other teams in the division, because obviously we heard from Bailey, Bears need a receiver, the Packers, as much as they've spent so much on receiver recently, they haven't really got a true alpha dog there. And the Vikings, well, their number 2 should be going to prison soon, hopefully. So they need a receiver. If we have to go up against him twice a year, it's going to break my heart.
Yeah, he's a tremendous player. When you, as a redshirt freshman, can come in playing with a redshirt freshman quarterback who's never started a game in his life either, and from day one you look like a polished article, then that just goes to show how good he is. Like, this has not been a good Stanford team the last few years. Like, some would say it's been pretty abhorrent. And he came in and looked like a seasoned veteran. The way he runs it, he's clever. He's a big guy who's clever. He's so good with his awareness when he's out in space. He knows where all the DBs are. He knows how to, take advantage of the coverage. Like, the route tree may be a little limited because he plays on the outside so much, but what he does run, he runs perfectly. He's a valid technician about it, and he's just a big play threat downfield. But he will do a lot in the short and intermediate game. He's a 3-level threat. He'll do all sorts. He'll get plenty of yak after the catch. That Colorado game, they were just sort of dumping it off to him, and he was going to the races, skinning 2, 3, 4 guys. But he looked polished since day one. I was shocked he declared this year. I thought he would have taken one more. I would have liked to have seen 1 year of him at a big Power 4 school because he would have been a unanimous round one pick at that point there, I believe. But the receivers are seeing what it's like. Coming into the NFL now, the receivers getting younger and younger. I think you're going to see a lot of receivers who don't make the senior year anymore. Like when Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams and all these guys come up, they're going to come up in their junior year because they know you can adapt to life in the NFL quicker than most other positions can. You can get paid quicker than most other positions can, and you're going to see more of these type of guys come through. But he's in conversation as like he has round one potential about him as well. Like there's no doubt about it whatsoever. And with much better quarterback play and with experience under his belt, I think he's going to be a tremendous asset for somebody. Absolutely. I would hate to see him anywhere near Detroit as well. But I don't think we're going to be in a position to pick him from where we're at either. So, yeah, he's tremendous. He's a big outside guy with a brain, and those are a dime a dozen. So, yeah, someone's going to be very happy with him. And again, I think he'll go sooner rather than later.
Just to justify what someone was saying in the chat about how are some of these guys sleepers. So he is on Tankathon's board in the mock draft at the moment at 58, which I think is a full round below where he should be at least.
Yeah.
I do think he should be a top 20 guy. So I did post just now in the Draft Network Discord. So why is he not a consensus round one guy yet? One glib remark was that he was going in the top 10 of the CFL draft, which I thought was funny. But the other one was it just seems that Matthew Golden's kind of taken the spot that might have been his. I think there's room for both. But I do think... So I have Golden and him almost rated the same. In terms of just valuation. I actually think that Alex, whatever his name is. Elic, thank you. His skill set is more unique in today's NFL than Golden's is.
The opposite. Elic is more polished because he's got a lot more experience. Matthew Golden can be a more dynamic player. But again, it's apples. It depends what you want. Elic is in his own right is tremendous, but Golden's got that little bit more explosion about him, and that if you're comparing ceilings, one's is just a level higher than the others, but they're both going to be very high levels.
I'll tell you what, in terms of amount that both players have played, and I know that Elic has played at a slightly higher level for longer, but Elic has 1,468 snaps. Golden has almost 1,800. Golden has,
but Elic has 2 years as a starter. Matthew Golden doesn't. This is he's played in college longer. He's older, so you kind of got to kind of balance that. He's had 3 years in college. Matthew Golden has. Elic's had 2.
Yes, yeah.
And again, in terms of starting reps, Elic didn't play his first year, so.
Yes,
but he's been a starter for longer, and it does count going forward. You can see he's more polished right now. But again, this is a good thing about this receiver class. There's just a lot of potential, like so much potential. No slam dunk right now, guys, but there are a ton of guys who will be first round value in the end.
All right, time to move on to Ash, your penultimate player.
My penultimate player is... I know Ant just said there's no slam dunk, this is what you're going to get kind of receivers, but I think I found one, and it's someone he knows very well. We were just mentioning Colorado, so let's go to their big rival, shall we? Colorado State, the receiver who wears number 14, Tory Horton. So he's 6'3", he's 185 pounds, and he's a graduate, so he's actually like a seat like above a senior in a way. So he spent his first 2 seasons, 2020 and 2021, at Nevada, and then he spent 2022 to this season at Colorado State, following Jay Norvell after he moved from Nevada. This past season, he had an 82.3 offensive grade, an 81.4 pass grade. I will come to why that is put like that in a second. A 78.4 drop, 76.8 fumble, 64.4 run, 66.5 run block, a 60.5 special teams with a 78.8 kick return grade, and an 86.4 punt return grade. He only had 203 offensive snaps this season. So we only really played in 3. So that was, it started weeks 1 to 3 and then 6 to 7 and played 1 snap in week 14. He had 51 snaps from the slot, 151 out wide, and then 1 slot snap in the backfield, which was that snap in week 14. So he was targeted 38 times, got 25 catches for 331 yards and 1 touchdown, which was a 91.0 passer rate when targeted, 3.8% drop rate, 50% contested catch rate, forced 7 missed tackles, and he had 1 penalty. He was used 64.7% of the time outside, and then the other 35.3% was in the slot. He had 13 special team snaps, and on those, he had 4 punt returns, which he took for 78 yards and a touchdown. Unfortunately, because of that injury, the game I couldn't really watch the 24 tape, so I watched his infamous game in 2023 against Colorado, where he had an 84.0 offensive grade, an 80.9 pass grade, and a 84.6 run blocking grade. He had 16 catches on 18 targets for 133 yards and 1 touchdown, but he also threw the ball once for 30 yards and a touchdown. He had 92.9% of his snaps came out wide, with another 7.1 in the slot. Didn't drop a thing, and he was 100%, 1 of 1 on his contested catches. So this is a guy who is a productive receiver. So in both of his first 2 seasons at Colorado State, over 1,100 yards, and he had 8 touchdowns in both seasons. So you are getting up again, productive guy. You know what you're getting from him. He's a guy who can produce. The age might be a knock to some, though, because it will suggest that maybe his sort of reached his ceiling of development. Like, you're not going to get much more out of him, unfortunately. But he also has that very high floor that comes from playing 5 years, having the production. There also is a big medical red flag on him as well. So he supposedly suffered a season-ending knee injury. Will be interesting to see what comes out of the combine about it, whether he does the drills. He was nursing a groin injury earlier in the season as well, before he suffered that knee injury. The reason I said suppose he was season ending is because that came in week 7, but then he played that 1 snap in week 14, which suggests that it obviously wasn't season ending. He had the surgery, was able to come back. So hopefully we will see him at the combine, and he will be able to do medical test interviews and the drills, because this is a damn good receiver on his day. So literally the first play of the game was a tunnel screen to him. He really was the focal point of the Colorado State offense, as suggested by his production. The fact that he just kept going back to him. So again and again, they were throwing these sort of tunnel screens to him, getting him on crossing patterns, really trying to get him the ball. And when he does come off the line, not only with those screens, but when he's running more traditional routes, he has really good acceleration. He just bursts off the line, tries to really just beat the cornerback for speed, which he does most of the time. And he has, when that doesn't work, he then is able to use a quick step sort of release package against press coverage. So he did it quite a few times where he just goes left, right, as we mentioned earlier with Harris. And then as soon as the cornerback commits to a certain direction, he bursts the other way and he's off. And he's really winning run blocker as well, and a pass blocker. So there was a rep where his teammate is running a drag route, he's running laterally, catches the ball, Horton gets there, blocks his cornerback to make sure that he can't tackle the receiver. It gets them an extra couple of yards and they convert for a first down, which was really good. But he's also good on drag routes himself. So there was one where it was like a 3rd and 8. He catches a drag route, so 1 yard off the line. So he's still got 7 yards to get. He gets it, just bursts away from his defender, gets the first down, and they then build on that later. There's quite a few times where they were running these drag routes. It moves the linebacker one way, and suddenly they run sort of RPO off that, where he runs the drag, linebacker moves to because they see that motion, and then they run the running back, and it gets him a nice couple of yards. There's also a very nice post pattern from him as well, where he got a free release. No one was really covering him, which I found weird, but just runs the post perfectly, gets the ball, gets the ball in a perfect position, make nice big conversion for them. And then he also had a very nice skinny post to score the touchdown in the first overtime as well. Trusted guy in that sort of high leverage situation, they go to him. He's also very good in the scramble drill. He's constantly coming back to the ball, trying to make sure that he's open for his QB in case he wants to throw it to him. And then obviously, as we mentioned, there was a trick play where he threw the ball And it was a really damn good throw from him, to be honest. So on that play, he's at X position, left wide receiver. He all but motions into the backfield. It looks like a screen. QB throws it to him as if it's a screen. And he's got I think it's his tight end coming downfield, and it's just a perfect throw at the end, right underneath the goalposts for the touchdown. Really damn good. So Horton's a very, very good receiver. He's just going to have that knock that production fell down this year and the injury. So my comparison for him is someone that we know quite well. It's a faster Josh Reynolds. So Reynolds was roughly the same height, but 10 pounds heavier at the combine. But by the eye test, Horton is a damn lot faster than him. But again, Horton is that ex-big slot guy that we all know, I know and love, and we're looking to fill. Though he does offer that sort of trick play ability, he can play in a slot as well. And because of that speed, he could do some things at the Z as well. So right now, he is the 14th ranked receiver on the consensus board, the 90th overall prospect. If this was last year, I would have him rated a lot higher. But taking into account this year with the injury and stuff, I have to knock a bit off his grade. If he can reclaim that health and the form from 2023, whichever team's getting him is getting a damn good ex-receiver. But because of that drop-off in the productions, it wasn't just because he missed games. He was on pace for lows in catches, yards, and touchdowns compared to those 2 previous seasons at Colorado State. It might be that, you've capped his ceiling. Teams worked out how to defend him, and you're only getting that sort of wide receiver free role, which for us would be perfect. For other teams that are looking for someone to fill that role, maybe they'd want more. But I think we're also the kind of team with Scotty Montgomery, what he's done with receivers before, what we've seen him do with our running back room as well. He's the kind of coach that maybe can get that best out of Horton.
And Tory Horton, what do you think?
I think he should have declared last year. I was really shocked that he didn't declare last year. And obviously that is the danger that comes with it. You go back, you get hurt, and then you're a year older, you hurt, and it hurts your draft stock. But as a receiver, I absolutely love him. I feel like I've been going on about him for years now. So to put it this way, how long he goes back, he was taking passes from Carson Strong at Nevada. Like that's where he goes. That's where he started off. That's where he got his bread and butter. It was part of the Jay Norvell traitorous coup over to Colorado State, went over there, but I mean, hell, it worked for him. And he's great. 6'3", 180. People might say about the frame being a little light, but he's physical. He is, is as tough as boots as they come. He'll run block when he needs to. Like in that game against Colorado, like they hate one another, and he hit them all, like anyone he could get his hands on. And I love the physicality about it, but it's his versatility. You do so much with him. He doesn't just play outside. They use him in the backfield. They get him in motion. They play him in the slot. He's just an absolute matchup nightmare, which is why his productivity has consistently been good and never dipped, because they just find new ways to utilize him against opposition, and they can't do anything about it. And that's where his value lies, is that he's a Swiss Army knife that you can put in 1 of 5 or 6 different positions and get some good usage out of him. And I still believe that receiver is there in him. Obviously, you want him to get healthy in that first and show that he can, but you don't discount these small school guys. I had him above Malachi Corley at one stage, and Malachi went, I believe, round 3 to the Jets last year. And I would assume he still might be in that range. I don't know whether the injury will bump him into day 3, etc. But these little guys who can do all these things, who've tons of experience, there's a place for them in the NFL. And again, I just like everything about him. I like the skill set. I like what he brings to the table. And I do believe there's room for development, because he's only played in the group of 4 or 5, and he's never had the greatest quarterback play either. Like Fowler Nicklaus, he's decent, he's good, but he's never going to be above average. He's never going to be a great one. And you've seen how receivers can come on with better quarterback play, with better teammates around them as well. That can elevate their game. You can see more out of him. And, he's just so vastly experienced. He runs every route that you can pretty much think of. He's a very good technician when it comes to running those routes, and he's got everything you want. He's very intriguing. Like if you're sitting in comp pick territory and you need a bit of a gadget weapon on your offense who can potentially become a big part of your offense going forward, it's perfect value in there for him. If you've got a few picks in day two and you don't mind doing it either, I think that's perfect for him. I just think he missed the boat by not going last year. I think he was solidly a day two player last year. You're talking maybe 60s, 70s. I think now maybe you're probably talking 90s, 100s, something like that, dependent on, and that's down to the age and the injury, unfortunately, which he'll not be able to knock off. But there's no doubt if he gets back to full health, he will be a good receiver in the NFL for somebody in due course.
I have nothing to add, and I think we've talked about him quite a bit. So, where are we? We are on Ant's last guy. So, you have someone who was actually requested earlier on in the chat. Someone is very excited to hear about. So, and you have the Illini guy.
The Eli, was that a word? Was that a play on words?
I tried.
Oh, it's.
I tried.
Put some respect on this man's name, damn it. Yeah, we've
maybe the best wide receiver called Bryant in some time.
What? Kobe was a basketball player. I'm sorry, you left yourself open for that one there. Let's get on with this, shall we? Pat Bryant, the outside wide receiver from the Illinois Fighting Illini, give it its right title. 6'3", 200 pounds, tells you everything you want to know about him. This is an outside receiver who is mean, who is nasty, who is just my type of guy. And I think I got asked a question about these type of guys at the start of last season, and he got put into that conversation as potentially someone in this muse, but he's tremendous. Like I say, 6'3", 200 pounds. He's got the frame you want from an outside X wide receiver. He's been a lifelong Illini guy. He's never left. He's never gone anywhere else. 136 receptions, 2,091 yards, averaging 15.5 yards per reception with 19 touchdowns, but 17 of those have come in the last 2 years when this team has really taken off, and that coincides with Luke Altmaier becoming a pretty decent quarterback in that time as well. But he has been the go-to target for this team, and you think of all these players we've fawned about over Illinois in recent years who've come here, Kirby, there's Devin Witherspoon, all these guys. Well, what are the one thing these guys have? It's the attitude. They're nasty. They're better than you. They know they're better than you, and they just have this swag about them. And Pat Bryant is no different. When you watch him play on the field, he's another like Trey Harris, so you're never going to get game-breaking speed out of this guy off the edge. That's not his game. His game is getting in dirty, getting in deep, going up for these passes, bringing them down. As a contested catch guy, there's probably no one like I love more when it comes to the outside receivers than this draft for him. So I say he's had a good year. He's coming off a nearly 1,000-yard season with 10 touchdowns and had some noticeably good performances. The one that I really liked was against Rutgers later on in the year. And people say, Rutgers has been a very good school for DBs these last few years. Obviously, Max Melton came out last year. Robert Longerbeam's coming out this year. He's going to be a good draft prospect as well. I think it's a good barometer to measure him against, and he had 7 catches for 197 yards and a touchdown. He showed off his deep playability in this game, but as I say, it all starts with his physicality. Like his physicality, the route running is really good from him. Like he doesn't just sit there and run goes. They bring him in field a lot. They try and get him open against some of the slower DBs. He's able to get separation against these guys and create, the room he needs to get the yak after the catch. Bringing him down is a nightmare. Again, at his size, it takes 2, sometimes 3 guys to be able to bring him down. The undersized DBs cannot deal with him. But his catch radius, like his hands, you throw it in his vicinity, he gobbles it up. It's like a black hole. He will just go to him and no one else is getting that ball off him. And then, good, solid ball security, will not let this thing go. And again, try and bring him down at your peril. And he's got good long speed, so it takes him a bit of time. But if you give him 2 or 3 yards just to build up his momentum, you can kiss goodbye to getting him. He is surprisingly speedy for someone of his build and the way he plays. And you don't necessarily see it all the time. And it's something I would like to see at the next level, creating space for this guy and getting him going, because he's going to be great. But I love him as I say, this physically gifted receiver who's just going to move the chains, who's, just going to break open a defense in its secondary. He's great. And then, of course, it's the run blocking, and the Illini preach, blocking, run blocking, not just for your receivers. Everybody has to chip in. And as a perimeter blocker, he's fantastic. The technique is good. Again, at 6'3", you think he's a bit too high. The leverage could be an issue. His hands are really good. He's got plenty of strength behind him and power to drive guys back, and they love sort of setting up screens behind him, running behind him, and getting some good chunk yardage out of it. And he's not afraid to go and do that. And, again, these are the receivers I really love who just goes, it's Puka-like in the way that he does it. Like, it's similar, it's mentality in there. It's like, first out, go and do the dirty work for your teammates, then go out and be a hero yourself. But like, the run blocking is probably one of the... There are not many who run block better than him. Maybe Ricky, but in terms of the bigger prospects out there, that's what you're going to get with him. And he's team captain on there, which is what you want out of again, if you're looking for potential Lions prospects, they like their captains, they like the leadership roles these guys install. And I say he's helped turn this Illini offense around, because it's the defense in recent years which has produced all the talent. And as Luke Altmaier's got better, he's been the #1 go-to target for him. And you've seen, even in the postseason as well, in the bowl games, like, again, his hands are just really solid. The ability to go get these catches, really solid. There's just, in terms of an X, I don't think there's much more you can ask for from him. He's your prototype. And yes, it comes with kind of the prototype problems. So, again, the top end speed, the long speed's good, but like the initial burst off the line is not. But a lot of guys like that have issues like him. There's the route tree as well. He doesn't play too much in the slot, so the routes he runs on the outside are good, but you want to diversify it up a little bit as you come up to the NFL level. Just give him like a little bit more, in terms of versatility. I mean, obviously you're predominantly going to use him on the outside, but I think he'd be quite good at that. And then sometimes the press coverage, for his size, you do watch him sometimes in press when he's trying to get off, and you think, you could absolutely destroy him. And there's the odd occasion you'll look at it and he doesn't. And I don't know, maybe it's, a thing he's not asked to do too much. He does face a lot of zone and that. But these are just little things you can mold about him. And when he works in a new system, he'll be fine in the long term. All I know is, if you're looking for an X receiver, this is a guy who should be like right at the top of your list, especially if you're not willing to part with a day one pick for like an elite guy. He's another who, I don't know where his draft predictions have him at the minute. I've always thought of him as a day 2 guy. I think he's clearly going to be a day 2 guy. And he's coming from a school that I completely trust in terms of what the Lions want, in terms of potentially what we need as well, depending on what happens with Tim Patrick, etc. He could be an absolutely perfect fit here as well. So yeah, Pat Bryant is just a guy I've been very admirable of for some time now, and I'm intrigued to see where he goes. But if he ends here, I absolutely wouldn't be upset at that one bit. And I know universally he's liked by quite a lot of people as well. So yeah, that's Pat Bryant. He's your guy if you want that prototype X with the potential to be so much more.
Ash, Pat Bryant.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen like one game of him. Like, I have a soft spot for that college now after a certain draft pick a couple of years ago. So when he popped up on the radar as a potential X receiver, I sort of look at him and yeah, I like him a lot. Completely agree. Like, I have like a sort of low end comp for him, which is going to scare people, and then a sort of higher end one that might be a bit better. So the low end one, because as you said, he is the prototype X, but sometimes that is working in the NFL. The low end is N'Keal Harry, which is still a decent. It's a decent receiver. It's just was overdrafted by the Patriots, wasn't used right, but in the right system, like we could wide receiver 3, blocking guy, use on certain routes where he works well. That's a good receiver. The high end one, again, and it's someone that we kind of know pretty damn well because he played for us this season. And I know there's a slight difference in their build. Like this guy's that I'm about to say is 2 inches taller, but Tim Patrick. That's a guy who, on his day, like Patrick way back, we are talking a couple of years ago, but 700 yards, been back-to-back seasons with. That's what you can get out of Bryant, and you'd be very happy with that with where he's currently slated, which is round 4. Like if we trade back, I don't know, one of our things, like let's say 28, there's too many people there and we're like, oh yeah, we could maybe go back a bit, and we pick up a mid round 4 pick that bridges the gap a bit, and Bryant's there. You've run the card in because you're not going to expect him to do too much with him being option 5-6 in the passing game behind Amon-Ra, behind JMO, behind Sam, behind Gibbs, Monty, arguably Brock Wright. Couple of targets a game in the key moments, and he will perform for you.
The role is the perimeter blocker. It's what you want when you want, Jameer out running and getting outside the tackles, and that they can teach him to beat press easier with his. Like he's going to be a fucking monster. Mm-hmm. That's all he needs. He needs those little tools, and he will be great. But we need one, really. If you're going to do that stuff on the outside, you want to emphasize guys who block as well, and there's not many who do better. I
have won Ant over. It's taken a year of me repeating it, but finally I've converted someone to we need an X receiver train.
I like it. Hang on. I'm the one who was going all over Puka 2 years ago because he blocks.
I know. It's just winding everyone up. Wasn't like 12 months ago. I was like, we need an X receiver. We need it every single podcast would bring it up.
Let's be fair.
I never heard him say that. I never heard him say that.
I would say that's not the only reason you wound us up. But, moving on.
The hobby.
Right. Time to go on to the last guy I'm profiling in depth before we go to the other guys, final ones, and then we've got a few of the other first round guys to briefly talk on. My guy is the other Missouri guy, already mentioned by Ant earlier today. It is Theo Wease Jr., who has a bit more to say this year, specifically because of what Ant was saying about Luther Burden, and Burden taking a lot of the attention, which meant that Wease had a bit more of a shout this year. So he's coming in. I'll give him the vital statistics first before talking about where he could get drafted. So he's a 6th-year senior at Missouri. So 6'2", 192 PFF grade this year. Career high 77.6. He's an ex-wide receiver. Almost 87% of his snaps out wide. So very much pigeonholed ex-guy. Don't think he works in the slot particularly well. It's not going to be his game. 3.2% drop rate. So very reliable, generally speaking, when he's being thrown the ball. In 13 games at Mizzou this year, 60 catches, 884 yards. That's 14.7 yards per catch and 4 touchdowns. Last year at Mizzou, 13 games again, 49 catches this time for 682, 13.9 yards per catch and 6 touchdowns. His previous 3 years were at Oklahoma as a backup. So he moved after 3 years at Oklahoma to get some starting play, immediately started for Missouri, and saw an uptick in what he did and had a good year this year as well. I watched one game in full and a little bit of another game, so against Boston College and Texas A&M both this year. Just to say, by the way, picked him because he's specifically a guy who's slated to go late in this draft at the moment. He's kind of put in as a kind of round 7 sort of UDFA type guy. dropped a wide receiver screen, which was a very slow-moving pass, but turned his head to face traffic before catching the ball. And sometimes he does have... I find that when he knows that he potentially might get hit catching the ball, that despite his tallness, I don't want to say big frame because he's not a big guy. He's a particularly slender guy, and it's a bit worrying to me that he anticipates getting hit, and it can affect his concentration to actually complete the catch. Had another sideline catch that he couldn't make alongside the sideline in tight one-on-one coverage. Other guys that we've profiled tonight so far are making that sort of catch. It's hard, but at the next level, especially at college, you want to be making that catch so you can say to NFL guys, I can make this one. He can create separation underneath. He did do a couple of times in this game. It didn't get thrown the ball. He's got good, not great speed. I think it's frustrating given that he's only 192 pounds. I wouldn't be surprised if he's going to run in the mid 4.5s, maybe. He's not a plodder, he's not a 4.7 guy, but he's not especially quick. Good route runner. Nice route run straight into the cornerback, and safety's taken space away from them for the underneath guy for the touchdown. So, he knows how to run at defenders to kind of clear out space for other people. He's quite unselfish in the way that he runs routes, which is good. And, speaks to his football IQ, which is I'm not going to say it's elite, but it's good. He knows what he's meant to do. He knows the aims of what he's trying to achieve. That comes with being a 6th-year senior. Very smooth hitch and turn to beat one and get another 5 yards. He's a very willing blocker, but his technique looks poor at times. Plays high. And I mean, he's 192 at 6'2". So, how much can he do blocking some of these bigger corners coming downhill? He's not as stout as he could be. And it's actually kind of slightly disappointing given his height. I really think, given that he's not exactly a quick guy anyway, maybe putting a few more pounds on so he can be a better blocker wouldn't be the worst idea in the world. And a bit stronger at the catch point. Really nice 10 and in, smooth and good hands. Felt the hole in the zone. That's something that's actually quite consistent. He's got a good feel for coverage. Finds lots of joy underneath. Brady Cook, Ant talked about it with Luther Burden. He was under such pressure because the offensive line was absolute shit. But Cook really struggled to throw outside the numbers. And so when Wease plays 87% of his snaps out wide, how successful are you going to be? And so that really hurts his evaluation. I don't know how good he can be. That's kind of hard when we're talking about profiling some of these guys and actually trying to talk with authority about what he's going to be like. But, nice break for the slant and a good catch. Seems to only have one speed. He gets up to it quite quick. The acceleration's okay. The 10-yard split might be up there with some of the faster guys, but he's going to tail off fast. So, reasonable explosion, gets up to top speed, and then kind of just stays there. He drew a nice DPI against Texas A&M as he tried to turn for a post route. He had the defender beat, so the defender just took him out. He lacks suddenness out of his breaks. He's just not someone who's got quite the preciseness, the drive as he sticks a foot in the dirt and gets out. That isn't him. So he's tall, slender. Route tree's fairly diverse given that he's actually playing out wide the majority of the time. So he runs screens, curls, goes, slants, shallow crosses. He does a good amount of work, especially underneath, but he's not someone who's going to threaten deep. Good lateral agility. That's kind of where he wins. That's how he creates his separation in the short routes. But it's weird. Lacks explosion, but good lateral agility. Why? Why is that the case? Why can't you have that explosion? Because if you could, maybe there's a bit more here. Contact balance is good. So even though he anticipates the hit and sometimes not gets scared of it, but it's in his head, when he does make the catch, he makes the catch. So he's just mentally got to get past the fact that he's going to get hit and just focus on the ball. Because if he does, he's going to come down with it. Blocking technique is poor, but he does try. Like I said, physicality at the catch point and being a plus blocker is something that's just going to be important for him at the next level. So he needs to put on weight. I don't see him succeeding at the next level if he doesn't put on weight, considering how he wins right now. Putting on a little bit of weight shouldn't hurt how he can catch the ball, but it will help him get on the field. And that's going to be the most important thing for him. So I've got him as a high 6, like, I don't know, go in the low 190s, high 200s, which is above where consensus is on him right now, because there's nothing to his game. Like, he is a good catcher when he's got it in his head, and he does win underneath. He can be a possession receiver, but considering the production this year, you play at Mizzou, especially when Brady Cook's having a mare of a year and the O-line is shit, and you get 884 yards. Like, that's not a bad year, but I struggle projecting him to the NFL level. His height and weight and how he wins. Something needs to change a little bit for me with him. I'm turning it over to you guys now. I know, Ant, that with you watching Luther Burden, you may have seen quite a lot of Wease. So what do you think?
He is an expert against zone coverage. Like, that's just a lot of teams. They faced a lot of zone this year, but like, he's got a brain. He's a craftsman. Like, exploiting the gaps in zone is his thing, and how he's got so much yardage this year. As you've alluded to, his problem is going to be his frame. When teams have started playing more press against him and started getting in his grill, that's where he struggles, and that's what's going to cap him until he can learn to deal with that. So I would put a little bit more on his frame as well, and I get, I get a hands coaching with him, just showing him technique again, trying to get some of these quicker releases off the line of scrimmage, because he's basically everything Luther Burden is not. Like, he doesn't have the feet, he doesn't have, the contact balance that Burden does. He doesn't have the extreme speed after the catch to go make big plays. But what he does have is the height that Luther Burden does not have. And he has a bit of the savviness that sometimes Luther does not have. So you've got to use that. There is a position in the NFL for guys who use their brain. They don't necessarily have the athletic traits, but, they're very crafty at what they do. There's always a place for these guys. But yeah, he's got to get more physical, and he's got to show better against press if he's going to ever truly go high, because, depending on where he wants to play, there's a ton of incredibly talented and productive slot guys and that who are going to take his position in there, so, he's going to fall because of that. So yeah, it's tough. He'll be a day 3 guy. This is something there. But as I say, he's a zone specialist, but not a press specialist. And that's where you got to get better.
Mm-hmm. I think I found his high upside comparison. Noah Brown of the Commanders, who was picked at 239, so a round 7 guy by Dallas in 2017. Similar height, 6'2", but Noah Brown's a bit heavier, 215. So get Wease in a NFL weight room, maybe you can get him up to around that. But that's what he could turn out to be. Like, Brown is a decent, reliable receiver. Like, has never really been the main guy for a team, but it's that kind of wide receiver 3-4 role that can be a blocker, can exploit certain schemes, but he's not perfect, and that's what Wease could be. That's someone who keeps getting signed. So he's been in the league 7 years now when he's still around making plays. If that's what Wease turns out to be as a late day 3 guy, you're laughing all the way to the bank, because most of the time now, round 7 guys camp tryouts, basically. They're priority UDFAs. So if you get that, or what's basically priority UDFA, you're happy.
Absolutely. All right, Ash, your last, in fact, our last guy we're profiling in detail, and then we've got 5 other picks to profile, of which 3 are currently round 1 guys, 1 is round 2, and the other is a round 7 guy. So your last one from the TCU universe.
Yeah, the Horned Bullfrogs, who is also one of the teams I have a soft spot for, not because of a player, but because, if you've ever seen one of the videos they put out after a victory, you can see why I love them. But anyway, it's their wide receiver who wears number 3, Saivion Williams, 6'5", 225 pounds. He's a redshirt senior. The reason for that is because he got some COVID eligibility. He spent all 5 years at TCU. This past season, he has had a 78.9 offensive grade, 70.2 pass grade. Again, that's for a reason. 57.0 drop, 68.4 fumbling, 90.5 run, 54.3 run block, 70.2 special teams. He has played 525 offensive snaps, 345 out wide, 95 in the slot, 1 in line, 38 in the backfield, and 46 at QB. The receiver, he has 60 catches on 83 targets for 611 yards, 6 touchdowns, 112.1 passer rating when targeted, an 11.8 drop rate, but an 88.9 contested catch success rate, 18 forced missed tackles, no penalties, and of those passing downs, as mentioned, the snaps, 72.9% out wide, 22.9 in the slot. When passing the ball, he was 3 for 3 for 22 yards and 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Rushing the ball, he had 51 carries for 322 yards, a further 6 touchdowns and 1 fumble. He also played 26 special team snaps, got 0 tackles and 0 penalties. So I went for one of the rivalry games, and it's a game we heard about last week when a certain defensive lineman was mentioned. So I watched the 2024 game at Southern Methodist University, so SMU. I went for one of the big rivalry games because if any game's going to get you fired up, it's one of these. 68.5 offensive grade, 64.8 passing, 81.2 run blocking grade. He had 3 catches on 4 targets for 50 yards and no touchdowns. He spent 82.8% of his snaps out wide, 17.2 in the slot, 0% drop rate, and he was also 100% for his contested catches. So as you can kind of tell by his snap usage, he did play QB at high school and then was converted to receiver in college. And because of that, the sort of QB knowledge, he's very, very good at finding the holes in zones and sitting himself down to make himself an easy target. So one of the things he does is if he's finding that zone, he instantly just turns his body away from the cornerback towards the QB. They're ready to receive the ball in. So while there's probably a high percentage throw, if he's the sort of check down, like just get me those 6 yards against the zone, he's ready for that. And he does that quite often, both possession ways and then also when going up against to get the ball. So there was a particular play, I think it was early in the game, where he elevated really nicely on the overthrow, used his body to box out the defender, and he makes the contested catch. He also then later on as well, just after that, he made a very, very good route, sort of just going on a go route. You're like, oh, what's going on here? But it's to sell the corner on a run play, the outside zone play, so the corner's out the way. The running back can then run into that sort of vacated spot in the outside. You've sort of lost the edge contain. Fortunately, the running back didn't get too many yards, but again, something nice he does on the run play. And then, again, one of my favorite routes for an ex-receiver, the intermediate dig. Very, very good route on it. Just a throw just behind him, unfortunately. While I was saying, obviously, that he did that one good deep route on a run play, and he did get a very, very good run blocking play. At 6 minutes and 3 seconds left in the first quarter, I made the note that I'm currently not seeing a lot of effort from him in the run blocking. So overall in this season, he obviously got a 54.3. He then proved me wrong. Literally the next play, there was a nice crack block where he was at left wide receiver on that wide. Really, really good crack block on the slot cornerback, just clears him out for a run. So while he's got the body for it, it may be an effort thing because it happened. Like later on, I said it as well. Just there's certain plays where it just doesn't seem as going 100%, which this team won't accept. So the run blocking, but a lot of the time as well, if the play's to the other side of the field, he's literally strolling around, just taking his time, plodding, not really doing anything, not really selling the play. That's something that this team will not accept at all. But there's good things, Tim, obviously, with the frame. There's he does, like, when he does block, it's really good. So later on, there's a block on the slot corner from the tunnel screen in the red zone. He sells his route just well enough not to get full call for OPI, because maybe in the NFL, there's a certain kind of ref, and he is playing for the Lions, there's going to be launch on the play because he literally does kind of he's there, and suddenly he just runs and in to clear out the slot corner. Certain refs will pick that up and say it's OPI, and he's got really good hip movement to separate from corners on the cut. So he sort of flips his hips one way, another. Same with the stutter step. He's doing that with his hips. He's literally showing one way, and suddenly just flips inside for the in-round on digs. It's beautiful to see when it happens. But quite a lot of the time when he runs those sort of good routes, the throw is behind him. So as you can tell by I said he got 4 targets. He definitely got thrown at more than 4 times, but because the throw was so bad, it doesn't count as a target or a drop from him because it was that bad. He really wasn't helped by his QB play there. So there's physical tools to build from. You've got the frame, you've got the height, and you've definitely got the speeds from him. But he needs more refinements in the pros, both in his route running, because there's some routes where it's just very lazy, but also the effort, because as I said, sometimes it's not there from the run blocking and from a route running perspective if the plays to the other side of the field. So my comparison for him is Nico Collins, because that was also someone, physical specimen, who needed help in the pros to become what he is, and it's worked for Nico Collins. So maybe we can get that. A team can get that from Williams. And his best fit is that athletic X who can stretch the field while also being able to make the contested catches over the middle and in the red zone when needed to. But he also offers that versatility because his speed and the way he was used in college, that you can put him in that sort of like Debo packages again to sort of go for the high end comparison of how that's used. Those kind of packages where you get him in the backfield, you scheme up touches for him initially while you work on the route running to get him the ball, because he can flip the field in one play easily. And because of the QB usage as well, you can use him in those sort of wildcat snaps or get him throwing the ball on flea flickers, like what we've done with Tom Kennedy before, that kind of thing. With JMO in the playoffs, maybe if we had Williams doing it, it might have been a better throw. So he's currently our 10th ranked wide receiver on the consensus board and the 68th prospect overall. It's roughly where I would have him. So you are really betting on the sort of physical upside here, the tools that you've got. He's not the complete receiver at all, and he will need coaching to refine himself to become that sort of consistent starter in the NFL. His ceiling is undoubtedly high. If you reach that ceiling, you're talking a top 10 receiver in the league, 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns every season. But the floor is also pretty low. He will have a high bust rate. So it really will depend on where he goes and whether teams pick him, because in that range, as we've seen, you've got Ricky White. You potentially might have some of the other guys we've mentioned in that range, and teams might look so sort of more higher, like the more reliable higher floor options than him. So this is someone you're very much traveling round 2, round 3 for, but also won't be surprised if he falls into day 3, just because it's a gamble to pick him. And if he does come here in that kind of range, we could mold him into an eventual starting X long term. But it also will mean we need to bring in a veteran again to fill that X role for another year, because you cannot throw him on there, snap one day, game 1, and expect him to do well, because it just won't happen. He's not there yet.
And any thoughts?
He's very intriguing. I mean, it's very rare you come across a receiver who has as many rushing touchdowns as receiving touchdowns. And when you're getting ran over 50 times a year, you're averaging over 6 yards a carry. That's immediate positional versatility. Screams red zone threat. You can bring him in as a short yardage back in situations you want to punch it in at 6'5", his frame, and then as a contested catch guy who can be a mismatch in the end zone in a short yardage situation. There's your in with him. Like, immediately you can do him in that role, and who knows, maybe it's 6'5", maybe it's too tall, maybe there is a future for him as a running back as well, because TCU certainly thought there was. Like, you don't rush a wide receiver 50 times in a year if you don't think he doesn't have that ability as well. But my only thing with it is, it's like with Besh. All 4 guys there have had a career year because they were taking passes from next year's Heisman winner. And I don't. We've talked a lot about guys having bad quarterbacks in this draft. Josh Hoover's going to be a Heisman contender next year. He's been good considering how much he's played, and I think he's elevated the play of some of these guys because all four of them have had career years, which is not, you know, you've got to take it as you see it. A lot of them have been in college for a while. They've not produced as much, and then they've had the big years this year. Coincides with the quarterback becoming good, and so can he do it consistently? Is my view, rather than it just been the quarterback elevating them to be as good as they have been. Potentially, absolutely could be. And he's fascinating. Like I say, in terms of a guy who has the frame, who you can use as short yardage running back, red zone threat immediately, and then over time, if you can polish him and turn him into a more, leveled, receiver who's, got more technique to him, got a bit more, panache to him, a bit more punch in him, you could potentially have a steal on your hands here. Like, he's a development guy with immediate upside for you while you build him into what you want to be an ultimate weapon. And if you realize what he can be, no one wants to go up against a well-rounded 6'5" receiver who also can run the ball. Nobody does. Somebody will find use for that. Can't think off the top of my head who will, but certainly, I mean, hell, you can even use him as some fullback as well if you want to. You can really go to town with him and what you can do with him. So he's certainly intriguing, but he is definitely a developmental project going forward. And yeah, I need to see the consistency first without Hoover to see whether that was just a flash in the pan because of his QB or whether it was him.
All right, we're going to turn our attention to the other guys here. So people that we have not necessarily watched in depth, but people that are relevant for some reason or another. And let's just start at the very, very top, shall we, with someone who looks like he's trying out at cornerback, but has been a two-way player in college, has arguably been one of the best two-way players in college history, in Travis Hunter out of Colorado. Presumptive top 5 pick. I hesitate to say top 2 pick just because of Abdul Carter and the quarterbacks. Let's see exactly where he lands. But it looks like he's decided to try it as a corner. It looks like the NFL have told him that predominantly they want him playing at corner, boys. But as a wide receiver and as just a prospect, Travis Hunter is an exceptional talent. I just want to kind of hand the ball off here to you guys because, I mean, like we were talking about, I watched Hunter get mossed in 2023, but barring that, from a guy of this stature, he's not a particularly tall guy, he's not a particularly big guy. His play strength and his catch radius and his the number of circus catches on both sides of the ball is ridiculous.
Yeah, it really is. So, like, obviously, I've got personal beef with him for a decision he made 4 years ago on my birthday. He broke my heart, and I will never forgive him for that. But at the same time, removing that personal bias.
Which team took him? Which team took him again, and at what level? Over Florida State. You've got to let the audience know. The audience don't always follow college football. He was enrolled, the number 1 commit in the nation, enrolled to the prestigious Florida State University. Where did he go in the end?
Jackson State.
For those who couldn't hear, that was Jackson State, an FCS program, one of the biggest commitment flips in the entire history of college football. He left Florida State.
On my birthday. Thank you, Mr. Hunter. But removing that personal bias and just looking at the receiver, obviously, when it comes to corners, it's a different thing. I get shades of CD Lamb from him, which sucks because, yeah, if he decides, fuck you, I'm just going to be a receiver, that's the upside you've got. He'd still be worthy of where he's been, like, sort of projected to pick. But then he's got the corner stuff as well. And I agree. Well, I agree with what the NFL's basically told him. He should be a corner full-time with packages at wide receiver, kind of what we just mentioned with Saivion Williams, having packages in certain situations and then playing full-time corner just because of how the nature of receiver is. We will see that you rotate them in and out depending on situation. Well, at corner, you just stick him on. But yeah, if he just chose to be a receiver, it'd still probably be a top 10 pick. Shades of CD Lamb, it sucks.
See, I'm of the opposite view. I think he should be a receiver. I think his talents are much more better suited to being receiver. Like his change of direction, his speed, his thought process. As a wide receiver, you dictate the play. As a corner, you read and react. And I feel like he wants to dominate. And some of the catches he makes, like his cuts out, like you just can't defend them. You know, it's even the best DBs. You could be draped over his back. You cannot get to the football because of how hard he cuts. I mean, if he does the 3-cone in this thing, Jesus Christ, he's going to redefine what the 3-cone is. You know, but he is suited to being a wide receiver. That is where he's at. You give him package. If you've got a pain in the arse receiver who's giving you problems on a day, you make packages for him as a corner. But for me, he excels when he's a wide receiver. That's where he's best. That's where he's in his wheelhouse, and that's where his specific traits translate better to, in my humble opinion. But
yeah,
if he goes either way, I don't care. But
yeah, my issue with him being a receiver full time is, yeah, he does have some great cuts, but what the tape I've seen of him at receiver, he relies too much on his physical tools to win. He doesn't have the route running prowess. So in the NFL, where there will be corners that will be able to match him physically, he doesn't have that route running to separate.
But
so
you can't train full time as a receiver when you're a two-way player. The thing is, you can train, but he's underdeveloped at both in certain aspects because you can't learn both positions. He will full-time go one position elsewhere. Now, obviously, with Dion around, everyone's assuming he's going to, you know, follow suit, but I don't know. I don't think there's no clear answer to this. I think personally, but I'd love to see him been a receiver in there. I think he'd be fantastic and just a game changer. But knowing him, he's going to try and play two-way. I know that much.
Yeah,
I want to know if a team's going to let him do it.
So he's played almost 3,000 snaps overall in college football after only 3 seasons, which is pretty insane. I mean,
some 6-year guys don't have that many plays.
No, and just to make it plain, Jackson State played him as a wide receiver. As a corner. At wide receiver, he played 59 snaps at Jackson State, whereas on defense, he played 395. So he played almost 6 times as many snaps on defense as he did on offense. It's only since he got to Colorado the last 2 years where he's basically played both full time. I do think
he came up out of high school as a DB, which is where Florida State were going to play him. If you didn't know, that's where he was going beforehand.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I mean, to be fair, Ash, you've not exactly suffered without him in there. Your DB line's been pretty good in the years he's been in college.
I mean, I think you probably would be better with him, though.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Might have stopped NC State from beating them some of those years. Yeah, you're right.
I think that his highs as a wide receiver have been higher than his highs as a corner. But the down-to-down consistency comes at corner. He is up and down at receiver. The other aspect of this is that at his weight, because he's undersized and there's no doubt about it, he's 6'1", 185, and I think 185 is potentially high. I think he might be playing at high 170s, 178, 179-ish. I think as a corner, he could live at that weight given how he plays. As wide receiver, I think he's going to get knocked around. Like, I kind of worry about him just getting absolutely...
There is not one player in the NFL who, I will say this for him, his effort levels are unmatched.
Oh, yeah, he did absolutely.
No one will play harder than him in anything. Like, he will be the... I've actually grown to quite like him. He's quite a likable character, but
absolutely.
Nobody works harder than him.
As a joy of the sport guy, he's right up there. Like... electric, just fun. Even if you hate Colorado and everything that program has stood for the last 2 seasons, he has stood alone as a likable aspect of that program. Maybe that's... I don't know if that's a fringe take or not. I guess some people like what Colorado have done and some people don't. I find Dion and everything he's done laughable. I think it's a joke. Maybe that's coming on a bit too strong.
It's a little harsh.
I think it's a cult. Maybe that's what it's the cult of Dion. And
for sure, yeah.
And I think that Travis has gone about his business in a way that almost says, maybe the cult of Dion, but I'm making my own cult. Like, the following he's got out of what he's done is like no prospect I can remember. Not as a non-quarterback, anyway. Like, he's just so damn fun, man. Ugh. Yeah, anyway. Travis Hunter. Let's move on to our next one and probably go in order of where they're going to be drafted. Some may disagree with that, but we're going to move to someone that I have loved ever since I saw him by mistake last year, because he wasn't coming out. But Tetrioa McMillan of Arizona. So I'm changing what's on the screen at the moment so you guys know who we're talking about. Doing it on the fly because I'm an absolute fool and should have done it in advance, but never mind. Oh, there we go. Okay, so Tet McMillan. Maybe for me one of the highest floors of any player in this draft. He's 6'5", 212. So potentially a bit slender given his height. PFF grade of 84.8 in this past year. He's an X, 78% out wide, 22% in the slot, 7.7% drop rate, so slightly higher than you'd like, but oh well. Arizona for the past 3 seasons. He is Arizona's all-time leader in receiving yards. And he's coming out as a true junior. Which goes to speak to the program, I think, a little bit. Consensus All-American this year. He led the Big 12 in receiving yards, 1,319 in 12 games, 15.7 yards per catch, 8 touchdowns, and actually his production was better last year. 90 catches for 1,402 and 10 touchdowns. He is a height, weight, speed guy. Oh, no, not weight. He is a height, speed guy. Even at 212, just because he's 6'5", he's maybe slightly undersized. He's a very physical player, especially at the catch point. I mean, he will just go and get it from people. He is an absolute menace. But he's really polished too, despite the aggression he plays with, despite how he can just use that height to just beat you despite perfect play. He runs all the routes out, all the alignments. His body control is unbelievable. His slight head fakes, his shuffles, the cornerbacks just do not read him particularly well. He's got an amazing way that he can just break on a ball. And you have a look at some of the taller players and they seem to kind of lack some of that lateral agility. But McMillan doesn't. He has the agility of that gadget player at 5'10" you're going to scheme up the ball for. But he's 6'5", 212. Like, come on, it's not fair. And to add to that, football IQ is off the chart. Like, in terms of the design of the plays, he knows where he needs to get to, he knows what he's doing, he knows what everyone else is doing, and he knows why he's doing it. So when he has to do things on the fly, he's doing it because it's going to aid the team in the play design. And I don't think I've enjoyed a prospect more so far in this process. Hands catcher, he goes and gets the ball when he's doing his... it's a very underrated thing, I think, this, but it's one of the more important traits, especially in the NFL, because so few players actually do this. When you run comebacks, when you run hitches, when you run curls, he comes back significantly to come and get the ball when he feels like he needs to. So there was a really big play in the West Virginia game where they were 20 points down with 10 minutes to go. So desperation time, 4th and 7. He runs a 12-yard curl, so 5 yards beyond the line to gain. And he's 5 yards beyond, and he's got 3 defenders coming to get him. He comes back to the ball 4 yards so that he is first to the ball. And he does this consistently with his routes. I don't know whether it's built in that he's going to slightly overrun to come back to create separation. But the number of times that he avoids his team getting picks and getting pick sixed because he runs his routes so precisely and because he is so conscious about where the holes in zones are. He doesn't do it when he doesn't need to, but he's conscious of when the throw isn't perfect, or at this sort of time, because he only needs 7 and he's going to run 12, he's got that room to come back and he's going to use it, because the most important thing is that he moves the chains. I am so passionate about Tet because he is an instant top 10 receiver in the NFL for me. Like, instantly. I do not care. If he needs to get on the same page with the quarterback that he gets drafted to, do the work in the summer, be on the same page day one, he is going to be that guy. And there's no flaws. There's nothing to improve. Just do it at the NFL level. Prove that you can do it against better opposition. Because, I mean, the thing is, he played at Arizona, which for the first 2 years of his career was played at one of the technically most difficult places to play against defenses. Like, he has been through it. And with maybe not the best quarterback play in the world, depending on who's been there for him. But it's not been the worst quarterback play, but it's not been amazing. He is my favourite prospect so far that I've profiled. I know that we haven't profiled them in depth, but I kind of did. Whatever. What do you guys think of Tet? He seems to be falling down boards. I mean, he was a top 5 guy. Now he's consistently in mock drafts in the late teens. I haven't seen him get out before 15 in ages. It goes 18, 19, 17. Sometimes I've seen him fall down into the early 20s. If he gets down to the late teens, I'm having a hard time not convincing myself to jump up and get him. Because, and I know it's almost spurious, it's almost a waste given how good our offense is, but this would complete it. And actually, I think it may take away from JMO and Amon-Ra, and maybe it's just redundant in some ways because we don't need him. He's so good. But, I'm sorry, I'm going to shut up now because I'm going to get too excited. Tell me what you think of Tet.
See, the big problem is press coverage is going to eat him alive at the next level. 6'5". He's not good enough getting off the line of scrimmage against press. He doesn't come up against it very often. That's going to be his beef at the next level. He's not going to, like, the likes of Satan and Gardner would eat him alive right now. That's where the issue is. Once he's gotten going and once he's gotten going, he's great. The separation is not the best in the world either, but he's a contested catch guy again who goes up and gets it. So, not really, but you would like to see a tiny bit more separation at the next level, but it's about working that frame into the NFL. 6'5" is big. It's easy to get under you. It's easy to stall you. And then once you're stalled, you're behind the play and you get taken out of it. I think that's why the issue has been with him. And it's just about his adaptability to that. However, as a receiver prospect, as you've said, he's got everything going for him. That size works in advantage when, you're in contested catch situations downfield. You do have good speed, not back-breaking speed, but good speed. You've got high IQ, good rapport with your quarterbacks. I mean, it's not a bad school. Jacob Cowan got into the NFL out of there last year before, 2,000 yards in 2 years. And he had him, they played together for a year, I believe, as well. So, you had a good pair in there. Now, he could be great, but we're just going to cool the brakes a tiny little bit. You've got to show that you can win against press in the NFL. Otherwise, teams will start to isolate you. Unless you go into a team where you're going to be wide receiver 3 or 4 or whatever, and you're just going somewhere ridiculously stacked and, the team's best opposing corner isn't on you. But if it were me, I'd be lining up against him and I'd be making his life uncomfortable. But yeah, no doubt in a few years he could be great. But yeah, you've got to sort that frame first and just see how he adapts to that, and then you move from there.
Well, I'll say what my comparison is, because then Matt can say his, because these are 2 very, very good receivers of mine, because I watched him and I was like, he's got the sort of height and frame in a way, if you put the balance of Mike Evans, but he moves like such a smooth route runner. That reminds me of someone. It took me a while to remember who, and then I remembered prime AJ Green. Like back when he was fully healthy, didn't have the neck issue, when Carson Palmer, Red Rifle, was slinging the ball to him in Cincy days. That is what Tech could be. Prime AJ Green, who was a top 5 receiver. Like, everyone's kind of forgot that now because obviously kind of career dwindled into the sunset as the injuries took up on him. The neck injury took over, and obviously the Red Rifle went to pastures anew, and the team kind of fell apart for a bit before the new Red Rifle came along. But Tech could be that good. And yet, I thought I was high on him, but someone else has an even better comp.
You say better, but just different and probably wrong.
Better, as in
yeah.
Because this is the best receiver in the bloody league you're comparing him to.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's the way he wins. It's the nuance in the route running. It's the way he can take the ball away from you. I'm thinking about tossing the ball up on 4th down and this guy has to go and get it. You need it to win. You can bank on this guy every time. He wins like Justin Jefferson wins. He runs like Justin Jefferson runs. If he can win press, as Ant has said, I haven't even really considered that aspect, considering he's 210. I thought he'd be able to do that, but maybe it's just an exposure thing. But removing that aspect of it, he runs like him, he wins like him. He's not the same height. That's not comparable, but is the extra 3 inches he has good or bad? I don't know. I don't know what height Justin Jefferson is. If you have a look at the scouting reports of both players, they are identical. And actually, if you have a look at where Justin Jefferson was drafted, it could well be identical. Like, Jefferson went late teens, right?
He went 22.
Yeah, okay.
Infamously the pick after Jen and Rager.
Yeah.
Also, he's 6'1", so he's 4 inches.
4 inches. But the way that the narrative is going with Tet is going the way that it went for Justin Jefferson. It is uncanny how close the comparisons are when you read the scout reports.
Yeah.
I'm just leaving that hanging as a comment. Right. Time to move on to another guy. It's the last guy who is someone I would say that's in the firm round 1 territory. Well, firm. Most people have him in round 1. I'll say that. So
top 40.
Top 40 is fair. Emeka Egbuka of Ohio State. I'm going to give his physical profile and then I'm going to hand it over because I want to go after some other people on him. So he is a senior at Ohio State. He's played there for 4 years. 6'1", 205. PFF grade this year, 79.5. 16 games this year, broke 1,000 yards just about in the final game. 81 catches, 1,011 yards, 12.5 yards a catch, and 10 touchdowns. In the previous year, 10 games, 41 catches, 515 yards, 12.6 yards per catch, and 4 touchdowns. It was a step down from his 2022 year, which was apparently his best. He kind of stepped back up again in this most recent season. This is one that he is a person who splits opinion. So, do either of you want to go first on Emeka?
I can. The poor guy is always the bridesmaid, never the bride, eh? First season, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave's there. Second and third season, Marvin Harrison Jr. This past season, Jeremiah Smith. Yet again, someone who, what could have been a... But still, he's never been the focal point of the offense, and it's kind of hurt him in a way because he's never had that production. But as a consistent kind of wide receiver 2-3, he did well enough, especially in that Ohio State offense. That's always going to produce yards and that. It's always going to be good. He was a quietly consistent guy there. Probably never going to be a wide receiver 1. We're not talking that kind of level here, but as someone who can play the Z, can play in the slot, I think my comp for him, I've watched one game of him, my comp for him is a juiced up Jacoby Myers. Someone who's just, quietly consistent, will probably get you between 600 and 900 yards and 6 touchdowns in the pros, but he'll never be your wide receiver 1.
I love Emeka. And this goes more than beyond his physical as a player. This goes his attitude. Like, he's had to graft to get on that team. He was an elite special teamer his first year. He's a great returner. Like, he's got some breakneck speed behind him. But he is intelligent. He is a great route runner. He is great at exposing coverage. He's the guy, he's Mr. Reliable. When you've got Mr. Flashies all around you, you need a Mr. Reliable, and he's been the guy who's just silently kept all this together. He's the reason why guys like Jeremiah Smith are that you can't give extra looks to them because then you let Emeka go, and because Emeka's the more seasoned guy, that generally he gets a lot of attention, which gives these other guys opportunities to make plays as well. And I think in his own right, even as a top 25, even as a top 25 draft pick potentially, you look insignificant next to the likes of Jeremiah Smith, next to Marvin Harrison Jr., next to Garrett. They're all top 5 pick worthy. And even as a top 25 pick, you look insignificant next to them top 5 picks, but you are still, in your own right, a damn good player. He's got the heart, he's got the attitude, he's got the IQ. This will ruffle feathers, but someone said who's most like Amon-Ra in this draft. Emeka has a claim to that in terms of the way he plays, the effort he gives. You would say maybe the blocking is the one area, but like at Ohio State, it's not the thing you're required to do all the time. But in terms of his craftiness as a receiver and how he can expose coverages and how he is your beating heart, despite not always been the flashy focal point of it, like Emeka's potentially there. Well, that's how good he is, and it's just he's not had a chance to show it and to shine himself, and that makes you, by definition, almost a kind of sleeper, not like a day 3 sleeper, but someone who's probably going to get overlooked. They're better than what they've shown, but he's one of the closest comps out there. People will not like it, but he's gonna. I don't know where he'll go, but I expect him to have a very productive career, especially if he's on a team with like a big superstar on the outside and he's allowed to go to work and do his job. He'll just consistently get you 600, 700, 800 yards a year, something like that. You can consistently count on that from him. And he'll make a great returner as well if you want to use his return ability. He's great at that. They say he's just stand out in terms of his attitude, and that's what really works for him.
I don't disagree that his floor is fairly high. I think his ceiling is low. Pretty low. I thought I was going to watch a really exceptional game when I turned on the Iowa tape from this year, where he got 9 catches for 71 yards and 3 touchdowns. And I came out super disappointed. And I've seen a fair amount of Ohio State just because it's kind of hard to miss them when you're watching college football. He's 6'1", 205, but he plays like he's 5'10", 180. Like, he's the one guy in this list I can strongly say plays smaller than he is. Like, significantly so. It's not just the blocking, it's also at the catch point. Like, he needs separation, otherwise I don't like him as a prospect. And despite being 6'1", 205, where there are other prospects that are smaller than that and smaller weight that we said can win on the outside, I don't think he can win on the outside. He's weak. As a physical player, he's just a bit weak. And so I think he's pigeonholed into a slot position. I don't see him winning in the NFL any other way. And he's not had to go up against press a lot, and given his play strength, I worry that if he comes up against a physical nickel player, as to whether he can actually win. So, at the moment, I see him as a bit of a capped player if a defense wants to play him correctly. The problem is that if a defense doesn't key into exactly how you can beat him, I mean, the guy's going to run 4-3-1, 4-3-3 in that sort of range, low 4-3s. He's an absolute burner. Like, really, really fast. I made some notes about the fact that I didn't think he looked that quick on tape, but he absolutely is. He doesn't, despite the speed, he doesn't create much separation. So I really struggle with this evaluation because I can see what happens. He goes underrated and he does do lots of things well, and the route running is good. But beyond being a speedster, I struggle to see how he's going to win at the next level. And yet he does a lot of the underneath stuff kind of well. It's weird because I want to comp him to Romeo Dobbs because the underneath stuff works really well, but the play strength is totally different. Dobbs is a massively physical player. And in some ways, therefore, I kind of want to comp him to the other Green Bay receiver. I want to comp him to Jayden Reed because he can kind of be that utility player and he kind of goes underrated and does a little bit of that stuff. In some ways, I kind of find him to be a hybrid of both of those players, but not necessarily in a good way. It's such a difficult evaluation. I've got a mid to low second round pick on him. I just struggle because when you're projecting him to the next level, when you say what can you hang your hat on, and it's speed, but does the speed actually win at the college level? Well, it hasn't so far. For me, that's not why he's winning. Then at the NFL level, can they shut down how you win right now? And I think the answer might be yes. So now can you win as a speedster? And I don't know. It makes the evaluation very tough. And I think that's why potentially his draft range has been anywhere from like early teens to mid-second round. I think I'm maybe one of the lowest people that I've seen out there on him, but I hope to be proved wrong because he's such a likable guy. The way that he wins, especially as what Ant said about him kind of going unnoticed in that Ohio State offense. He absolutely has. He goes underrated. He doesn't attract a lot of attention, and he delivers in the biggest possible moments. So there's a lot to like about him as a person.
I think his speed's not his main attribute. I don't get where it's his brain. The way there's room for specialists who run routes in there. That's what he does. He's deadly at all three levels. Again, he gets just as many touchdowns downfield as he does in his short to intermediate. If anything, he's better downfield. That's where he'll make his bread and butter here. There's a reason that even despite the limited productivity and the limited start, he's still up there. You'll not find many better route runners, especially down the center of the field. He will expose it. If he ends somewhere as a wide receiver 3, you could see him break 1,000 yards in the first year, potentially. That's where his ceiling's at.
But wide receiver 3 is exactly where I have him at.
Start with. Amon-Ra's our wide receiver 1, and no one ever thought that was possible, but you carve a niche for yourself. There's a need for it.
Yeah. Fair. All right. I'm going to move it on to the other receiver from another team that we've recently mentioned, and that is the Horned Frogs. And it is TCU, and it is Jack Besh. Is it Besh? Please tell me it's Besh. Thank you. I really should turn the volume on for some of these recaps so I can actually see how these bloody names are pronounced. So he obviously had I'll talk about his physicals, sorry. Besh, he's a senior at TCU, 6'2", 215, 83 PFF grade, versatile guy who can play all three positions, but 27% slot, 72% wide, 1.4% inline, 1.6% drop rate. That's one of the lowest we've seen out of all of these guys. He does not drop the ball. 62 catches in 2024, only 12 in 2023, so it's been, a real uplift this year. He was at LSU the previous 2 years before that. He had 59 catches in his LSU career, despite being a backup. This is the first year where he's really a starter anywhere, but 62 for 1,034 for 9 touchdowns. Like, he really has had a glow up this year. Obviously had an exceptional Senior Bowl. I think he was Senior Bowl MVP.
Caught the winning touchdown.
Yeah, and he had his brother die in the terrorist attack in New Orleans the month before.
Yes.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So, in the worst time of his life, he's going out there and absolutely balling out. So the guy deserves absolute respect. He is one of my favorite players in the draft as well. There's so many of them at wide receiver this year. So easy to like, but He's a height weight guy that has surprising speed. He's got good explosion without having the top end elite speed. So he's not going to take the top off like that, but just so damn reliable, extremely physical. Every rep's at 100%. Route tree needs work because he's just not asked to do anything particularly special at TCU. It's a pretty simple offense at times. Some of that might come back to the quarterback, which Ash talked about earlier. Route running on a down-to-down basis, I've said, is sufficient. Like, I wouldn't say he was a technician, necessarily. He can struggle to create a separation, which means that his 1.6% drop rate is ridiculous, given that a lot of his catches are having to be made in tight windows. The weird thing about his route running is that down-to-down it's not remarkable. But he has odd splash plays where he totally makes fools of the defenders. Like, his splash plays, like other players' splash plays, some splash plays might be like, wow, you've just blown that away for a touchdown. Whereas his is like, doesn't look particularly special. He's just going out there, catching the ball for 10 yards in a tight spot, moves the chains, you move on. And his splash plays are, makes a fool of a defender and gets 15. Like, in some ways, it's underwhelming and unremarkable. But in the best ways, he's the chain mover of an offense. He's the emergency valve, the reliable hands, the every time you want him to be there, he's exactly where he should be. If he could do what he does in those remarkable spots every single time, he'd be a first-round pick. And there wouldn't be really much question with that. And it's not like I'm trying to call out his inconsistency, because it's more just, it kind of just clicks for him in those moments. It's not down to lack of effort or thinking about it or IQ or anything like that. But just sometimes when in those moments, the amazing nuance, the fakes, I mean, it's almost like an exaggerated actor sometimes, but he really does make fools of people sometimes. And then he'll body them, he'll fight and claw. I kind of imagine him as a Luis Suarez of a sort of player. He's a twat to play against, but man, if he's your twat, you absolutely love it. He's a real plus asset in the run game. Like, he just enjoys bodying people for me. My comp for him is Keenan Allen, prime Keenan Allen sort of guy who wins not with elite speed, but just by being that guy. I mean, you remember when he was playing for the Chargers and he did us for over 200 only a few years ago. Like, I could see him 21?
18, 28, wasn't it? 2019?
I don't think it was that far away. I'd say 21, 22-ish.
That's where Slade was here, because he was covering him.
Anyway, Keenan Allen's my comp for him. I have him as a very high second-round pick, maybe 33 to 38 sort of range. Don't know. Anyway, Ant, what do you think?
I think you're a little too high on him.
Really?
A lot too high.
No, I thought you'd like him.
I do. Well, in terms of he's the Dan Campbell guy. He's grit personified. He is high energy, high octane, high motor personified, and that's how he beats guys potentially who are better than him, but he's not got the speed. He's not got the separation. Very limited as to what he can do as a receiver. It's, again, benefited from having a great season and a great quarterback throwing to him in a system which has been very pass heavy. And, he's done well in the offseason and he's doing well. And that grit will get him so far. But there's a ceiling. I mean, this was once the guy who had more receptions as a freshman than Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. And, he was meant to be a breakout star at LSU. And then it never happened because they clearly saw his limitations as well. And they didn't play him. And then he had to leave and go and find an opportunity elsewhere. So, he had the inside track on that job and he lost it. Not because he was injured. And it's taken him time to show what he can do at TCU as well. But when you're talking about him being one aspect away from being a round one pick, no, there's a reason he's been graded in round 3 and 4 and stuff like that. Like,
he's a consensus mid-round 2 player.
wasn't a couple of months ago. His shtick will work for so long, but there's a cap on what he can do. He's certainly not a round one consideration. Far from it. I mean, maybe late day two, something like that, but Dan will love him. And you know, again, I feel like I've been really mean to him here. I love him. Again, the effort and that he gives, his motor, he's just relentless, but he's an inconsistent blocker as well. He's not the best blocker. They don't generally tend to run the ball a lot at TCU either. It's not one of his best facets. So you want to go somewhere that's very play action heavy, needs, intermediate, like an intermediate guy where he can fit in and be that. Coming to a run heavy team is not going to be his bread and butter. Like he just wouldn't thrive in that sort of system. The fit is going to be very critical for him. He needs to find someone that'll take advantage of what he can do, but he ain't going to walk in somewhere and be a wide receiver one eventually. That's just not in the cards for him.
No, but I think he'll be a career wide receiver too.
Don't spend a first round pick on a career wide receiver too.
Well, that's why Ibuka's not going round one.
That's yeah, you're right, but the point still stands.
Ooh. I will say about also, I think Besh, if he lands in his best spot, will go to somewhere like San Francisco. I can see him being I think his blocking is well in advance of what you think it is potentially, but I think he could be a successor to Jennings.
Which brings me on to my comp, because what did I say to you when we discussed this? I know you don't like comps here, and this is probably the weirdest comp people are ever going to hear. Jack Besh is what would happen if somehow in the realms of like K-pop fanfics have come to real life and somehow Juwan Jennings and Puka Nakua have a very, very good night out together. They get absolutely drunk and they wake up the next day and something's gone completely wrong. Jack Besh is the prodigy of that weird union. That's what he is for me. I know I've said this. That's why I said it's the weirdest comp you're ever going to hear. But he has like the blocking and that sort of versatility to play all three roles that Jennings does, while having some of the ball tracking. So when I was watching Saivion Williams, there was a route where it was a flea flicker and Williams is the second option on it. He's running a 10-yard dig and Besh is running the go on it. And Besh's ball tracking for the touchdown is just, it reminded me of what we saw from Puka at BYU and what we've seen from him with the Rams. So I'm probably in the middle of you both. Like he's a high to mid second rounder because he's probably going to do well at the combine in some aspects, and he is rising up. He's on my list of like if we get to 60, we haven't taken a receiver in round one. He is pretty high up that list of run the card in at 60 if he's there.
All right, time to come to our last guy, and this is a guy that it's a little hard to get tape on, so this is going to be short. But it's someone that I felt like we needed to talk about, so we're going to. And that is Isaac TeSlaa. Don't call him Tesla, that ain't going to fly. Isaac TeSlaa of Arkansas. He is one of the more interesting prospects in this draft on day 3, or UDFA, and he could not get drafted. That's definitely a possibility. He's a super senior, 6'4", 217. So, maybe you want him to be slightly heavier, but a pretty prototypical X-type build. PFF grade last year of 69.1. He's a slot, though. He's not an outside guy. 79% of snaps in the slot, 20 out wide. Only 0.4% in line, despite 79 in the slot at 6'4", 217. Really weird, his usage. He has, in his FBS career, a 0% drop rate. So he's played 25 games at the FBS level, the last 2 years at Arkansas. 25 games, 62 receptions, 896 yards. I can't convert that into yards per catch because I've combined the 2 years.
14.2.
Thank you. 5 touchdowns. He was also in the full SEC honor roll. So smart kid. The prior 3 years, he was in JUCO at Hillsdale College He was the Great Midwest American Conference Offensive Player of the Year in 2022 when he left. After a season of 68 receptions for 1,325 yards and 13 touchdowns. He started at high school as a quarterback in Michigan at Unity Christian High School. And he was on Bruce Feldman's Freaks list in 2023. That tells you how old he is. So I watched some of his tape. So he caught my eye first in the Senior Bowl game because he was all over the place making some really great catches, moving the chains and just basically being unblockable. So I was like, I need to take a bigger look at this guy. Against Texas A&M this year, in the very first series of the game, he had a 75-yard receiving touchdown against that defense. From the slot, he runs a deep out and then he turns it upfield on the catch. Good long speed, very physical route. The nickelback is trying to kind of put him on his ass, and he kind of just runs through it. Really nice ball tracking. He just managed to carry his speed really, really well. Otherwise, he's got a great ability to extend those really long arms of his to make catches, which should be outside the radius of most NFL players. I mean, at 6'4", he looks quite gangly at 6'4" as well. Those arms, I wouldn't be surprised if they come out to be high percentile arms, as well as being a particularly tall guy. Nuanced and smooth route runner, nice body control, can fool DBs, good lateral agility, good and strong at the catch point. His problem really is, I mean, he's only played 25 games at the FBS level, but he's only like a rotational player even at that level. Like, he hasn't played that many reps. He wasn't a starter at Arkansas. So he's coming in as a high IQ guy, academically, high football IQ guy because he's played quarterback at high school, and apparently he was a reasonably good quarterback too. But he hasn't played at wide receiver particularly long. He hasn't played at really hard opposition particularly long. He needs reps, and he's a super senior, so he's not exactly a young guy too. So I do think this significantly caps his ceiling, but the highs are really high with him. And as a 7th round flyer, I think you could do a lot worse than Isaac TeSlaa. I know, Ash, you've kind of not really watched a huge amount of him. Are you watching a highlight reel as we're talking about him or something?
Oh no, I'm looking up players that have come out of Hillsdale, and there's because I'm going deep into it, and there's actually two that are kind of notable. One of who, well, so you've got Jared Vell here, the offensive tackle, who people might remember as, well, he was drafted by the Raiders out of Hillsdale in 2010, round 3, pick 69. Nice. Played a couple of years with Raiders, then was on the Cardinals. But yeah, then was with the Packers in 2019 and did pretty decent there. And the other one is Andre Holmes, who was on the Vikings for a bit. He was at the UDFA, but he's most notable for playing for the Bills for 2 years in 2017, 2018. It's like, there's a bit of prestige there as well as them. But yeah, he's from the area. People seem to know him, and it's kind of like, remember last year we brought in a couple of guys, one of whom I forgot, the slot guy who used to be a quarterback. It's the kind of thing we like in those sort of UDFA guys, because we don't have to teach them that much about offenses. They know what they're doing, so it's more about what can you do in camp? Can we work on your route running? Can we find you a role? And 6'4", 217, we can definitely do that. It might have been slightly misused by Arkansas. Who knows?
He's just raw. I think he's just raw as a prospect. I do think he'll go UDFA. If I had to put my money somewhere, I think he'll fall out of it, and I think he'll be on a lot of people's lists as a priority UDFA. For me, that's
fair.
Where it's at.
So that's what I'm gonna have to do when I'm at my flag football game. It's day 3. I'm gonna have to be sitting there. It was like we were when we were coming out of buddies, and I was just like, oh yep, we've just signed this player as a UDFA. We've just signed this player. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be annoying everyone, like, oh well done, your team's just signed this guy. Like, who the? Yeah, it's the annoying bit, exactly. Like those poor people in Northampton playing flag football. They're gonna have to put with me shouting about day 3 of the draft all day. They're like, shut the fuck up.
And have you seen any of TeSlaa? We watched the Senior Bowl together, so you've seen a tiny bit of him, at least.
I've been outside of that to form a valid opinion.
Fair. All right, we have that's all the players that we've looked at that I had listed out. There's obviously still a lot of players in this class who are draftable prospects, notably those that we have either mentioned but not gone into, or haven't mentioned at all yet. Isaiah Bond out of Texas, Jalen Royals out of Utah State, Xavier Restrepo out of Miami, Tez Johnson from Oregon, Antoine Wells Jr. from Ole Miss, Jalen Noel probably, isn't it, from Iowa State, Ty Felton from Maryland, Kobe Hudson from UCF, Caden Prather from Maryland, Dion Burks from Oklahoma, Ty Robinson from Ball State, but apparently he's barely played for the last 2 years. That's probably the end of your draftable prospects. Maybe. I know, Ant, you were going to watch Sakari Franklin at some point. I'm not sure that he's going to sneak into the draft necessarily, but there's a lot of players here that we still haven't mentioned yet.
I mean, you forgot every single Colorado receiver who's going to get drafted. That's the big talking point. Every single Colorado prospect is getting vastly underappreciated in this draft cycle.
Being Will Shepherd, Jimmy Horn, and LaJonte Wester.
Jonte Wester. They're all going to get drafted, and they're all insanely talented. And my one thing that I'm nearly sure of, so Jimmy, you're going to ask which day 3 prospect in this draft is going to have a long, fruitful career in the NFL, and not in a flashy role, but just in a he's going to be part of your offense role, and he has his place role. It will be Jimmy Horn Jr. He's only 5'10 and 170, but he will be somebody's slot receiver for a decade. He will be someone's kick returner for a decade. The man is Mr. Dependable. Every time you need a get out situation, every time you need a safety blanket, every time you need a little out over the middle, he's your guy. He's there. But I just don't understand why they're all getting so. Will Shepherd has forged a career out of Vanderbilt and Colorado. And, you know, people say Colorado's a big thing, but with the amount of competition there, he's basically been wide receiver 4. But at Vandy, before Vandy got good, he was a highly productive outside receiver there for them. And LaJonte Wester's just as good. All 3 guys are going to get drafted, and all 3 are probably going to far out surpass where they're drafted. But Jimmy Horn especially, you see him knock out a quick 40 at the draft, he'll rise up boards. He'll still go day 3 because of his size, but he will be one of the most consistent pure slots in the NFL for a long time, and they're just getting overlooked.
Any final thoughts, Ash, from you on this wide receiver class?
So there's a couple. Obviously, there's Sakari Franklin, who was in the same kind of boat as Tory Horton, but 2 years ago with us, we absolutely loved him, and then transferred to Ole Miss, and then now he's at Illinois, so I've seen a bit of him. He's one of them that, kind of like what we just mentioned with Tesla, like, because he's just fallen off the face of the earth in a way production-wise, he's probably going to be a priority UDFA for someone, but again, if lands in the right system, he can be unlocked for sure. And then there was a couple of guys I was maybe going to look at if I had time, which was Brew McCoy out of Tennessee. There was Boo Collins out of Notre Dame, and then there was Jalen Lane out of Virginia Tech. But they're also ex-receiver guys who are that sort of round 7 UDFA range that, again, we can maybe make a gamble on if the team thinks there's something there they can unlock. So as you can tell, I just love the X receivers. They're nice and easy to do. So there's guys that you maybe want to keep an eye out on late day 3. Kind of like Anton Green. He pops up out kind of out of nowhere and has still kind of got a role on the team. Those are the kind of guys that maybe will do that for us this time.
And any final thoughts from you?
No, I think as the class as a whole, I think the class as a whole is going to surprise a lot of people. It just lacks a lot of the household star impact names that recent years have had, but it's no the less more talented, and it's an incredibly young group as well. There's a ton of guys here who've declared early, so they're going to be around for a very long time. But yeah, I think this is going to be the class that surprises a lot of people for just how good it really is, as opposed to what people are saying it might be.
Yeah, it's there's a reason why I chose the title, which is slightly clickbaity on YouTube, but I wholeheartedly believe it. It's almost a class of sleepers. almost everyone is underrated, and it's weird. I'm borderline annoyed about how this class is seen.
It's just because there's a rise in defensive talent. Like we had this last year where we had that run offensive talent. It's almost a swing in perception this year where there's so much focus on the defense, and with how receiver is simultaneously seen as the third most premium position, but it's getting so devalued in draft circles because everyone's like, oh, you can easily find a receiver. They're all coming out of college now. It's led to all these guys. Like, think about it. I think out of the guys we discussed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 6 out of the 9/10 we've talked about, we all gave round 2, early round 3 grades on. Just shows how deep this class is.
All right, it's been a long show, so thank you to everyone who's been listening along with us the whole time. That's been the wide receiver class for 2025. Obviously, as we get deeper into the process, we'll give you some more thoughts. Just a little word on the shows that are upcoming. We are, of course, still in the minds of our draft prospects review. We are going to have a show next week, I believe, about the NFL Combine. That's what we have stated in our pod diary anyway. So that's what's coming up next week. The week afterwards is the start of free agency legal tampering, and normally runs a show live as the legal tampering period comes live, so all the news about who's signing who and where and how and why will all be happening at that point. Before we get back into 4 shows of draft prospects, then a Lions 7-round mock draft, a full first-round mock draft, a betting show, and then we are into the NFL draft. Guys, we are only 2 months away. It's absolutely nuts. 2 months today is the NFL draft. It is closer than you all think, so that's going to be really, really fun. I'll be away for the next 2 weeks as I enjoy America and all of that has to give, especially in the Vegas, Nevada, Utah, Arizona area. So I hope you don't miss me too much. I'm leaving you in some very capable hands talking about the Combine and the legal tampering period. I know that I mean, that's what Ant does best when it comes to this, is college ball and the free agency live stuff when it all comes out. So it's going to be some epic shows coming your way. And you did the college show again last week. Again, just remind us what that was on, because it's pertinent to what's coming up on the main pod next week.
Yeah, it was a Combine preview, so just going through the groups who are going, like what players maybe need to impress, what players don't, and all that. So yeah, it's sort of Combine related, really. So
all right. That is going to do it for us. So we will see you all next week. Socials, you know where to follow us. YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Royal Lions UK. If you are based in Europe, our own Ryan Farden is looking at arranging a trip for next season from Europe to Detroit. So I am hoping that there's going to be an invasion of sorts of us all coming to watch a game together. Maybe a college game on the Saturday too. It's still very much in the works. We have to wait until the schedule comes out to actually arrange some things like this. And then I have to see if I can actually get the time off anyway. But that's to look forward to. If you're interested, get in touch with us through all of our channels. The easiest way is just to message me directly on Discord, but you can do it through Twitter as well. You guys know what to do. If you want to see some scouting reports, Ash has started putting them up on our website as well, so that's going to be really good too. I'm going to start doing the same myself. Hopefully we can build a nice repertoire this off season. Anyway, hope you all have a fantastic week. We'll see you later on this week for the college show, but for now, let's go Lions, one pride.
One pride and fuck the soft little Packers.
Recording stopped.